everyone, I am the Enforcer, and I am here today, back after the Monday break, to talk about the news that has occurred over day 40 and day 41, the past 48 hours of the war, and there has, of course, been nothing but good news as of the past 48 hours. You may notice some major changes on the map tonight, and I do have to say that the changes have been huge. First off, we're going to cover the schedule for tonight, and then we're going to get into the news. I'm really excited, and also, I do watch, because there is a lag time, you see, in between the stream and what I see, and so I'm actually watching like 20 seconds ahead of y'all whenever I'm like playing stuff on OBS, but I do get to watch a bit of that intro, and I love that intro so much. I hope y'all do too, because I gotta say, the guy who made that, unfortunately, me and another guy on YouTube who've uploaded this thing, we haven't been able to track the guy down, and I wish I could give him so much thanks for making that intro, because it is the most patriotic and amazing intro. But anyways, we're moving on from that. Now we're going to move on to the schedule for tonight's news. First off, we're going to cover the remnants of the Northern Front. The Northern Front no longer exists anymore, as you can tell, which is the big news tonight, and we'll get into that a little bit later and explain how this happened and why we know that it happened. We're then going to move on to the Eastern Front, what's left of it. You can see that most of the front around Sumy has completely disappeared, which is, once again, huge news. We'll also cover the location unknowns, which are still up here in this one spot. We'll then move on down to the Kharkiv area, where there has been no news today, of course. And then we'll move down to the Southern Front, where a decent amount of news has been found. We've also gotten some news inside of Russia today, and instead of doing our normal international news format, considering that this kind of weighs into some of the discussions we're going to be having tonight about the Eastern Front, those will actually be included in the Eastern Front news. Finally, we have a little bit of news that came out of the Czech Republic. That's why this little marker doesn't actually have a little identification thing to it, but now we just gave that. So that way we can make sure that all the news is covered. I actually just got that just about like 20 minutes before coming on stream. But anyways, now on to the news. I talked about this a little bit in the schedule, but the entire Northern Front has collapsed. Okay, so it started off with the Kyiv front, and we saw that collapse, and I was like, oh my god. I was like, wow, this is incredible. Maybe they're just going to keep the fronts up here, and they're just going to hold them, you know, so that way they can tie up Ukrainian resources and not allow them to shift down to the south along with the rest of the Russian army, because that's what a lot of people have been saying is going to happen. That doesn't appear to be the case, because today we actually got news and picture evidence to show that the Russians have also completely retreated out of the northern area of the country. Completely. I mean, like, they've literally went all the way from Novobasan to, they're not even near Konotov anymore. They're not even in Ukraine anymore in this area. They have moved all the way across the border again back into Russia. So a lot of people, and I'm going to just kind of cover like the general strategy and stuff beforehand, and you know what people are saying and what I think is going to happen. A lot of people have been saying one of two things. The first one, which I think is the most illogical one, is that the Russians withdrew across the border to regroup, and once they get everything put together, they're going to come back across the border and try and push Kyiv and Chernihiv again. I don't think that's going to happen, because that doesn't really make any sense. Armies can regroup while holding the ground they currently have. That's something that has historically always happened. You don't see armies just literally leave the theater, pretty much, to withdraw and then regroup and then come back, because they've lost all the ground that they've fought for, and they're starting from square one. So I don't think that's going to happen, just in my opinion. But then again, you know, the Russians are pretty incompetent, so, you know, they may try that. I don't really know. But I think that's highly unlikely out of these two options. The second option, which I've kind of dissed on a little bit, but it's starting to look more and more like a possibility, is that a decent amount, or all of the forces that have withdrawn and retreated from the Northern Front, are actually being transported by railroad to the Southern and Eastern fronts, where they're going to join in the fighting there. Which, while I've sat there and dissed on that a bit, we've actually gotten a little bit of evidence today to show that it may be true that they are transporting more units into the Southern and Eastern fronts. So this may be something we see, but we'll cover that in the Eastern Front news. So, to get on to the proof of the pudding and show y'all that the northern area around Chernihiv has been liberated, the Ukrainians have entered a former abandoned Russian fob that the Russians once controlled. As you can see here, it looks like they have two graves for two Russian soldiers, I'm assuming. In the next picture, we can see some kind of dugouts that the Russians made at this fob. The next bit, we can see Russian artillery shells and also Ukrainian posing over them. Also, I like that AK-74. That's pretty nice. Moving on to the next picture, we can see destroyed Russian vehicles here at this camp. Next one, you see more destroyed Russian vehicles. It also appears in the larger picture, we can see some abandoned artillery shells and such. Sorry for the mispronunciation there. We're now going to move on to the next picture, where we can see... Okay, I have to say this. While I do make commentary on the war, I don't know everything, so I'm not really exactly sure what these are. If I had to assume anything, man, they kind of look like mines. Maybe some kind of explosives, but I'm not going to say anything for sure because I really don't know what these things are. Nonetheless, they were captured by the Ukrainians as the Russians retreated from the FOB. We can see a destroyed AK-74 without the stock and a bent barrel in very bad shape. And it also looks like the gun's pretty much rusted over in most places, and the magazine is in pretty bad shape as well, kind of beat up, but I'm sure it probably works still. But nonetheless, that is a messed up AK if you've ever seen one. Moving on, it looks like they had some kind of camo net over some kind of observation, like a little bunker. It's not a bunker, obviously. It's not really fortified. But it does look like, man, I forgot what those things are called. An observation post, I believe, is the most accurate term for what this thing may be. We're now going to move on to the next picture, where you can see crates of Russian supplies that have been left over. I don't really know the condition of these, but it was usually common in World War II, especially in the Pacific theater, for the Japanese to poison and booby trap resources that they left behind in some kind of retreat. So I don't know if the Russians are doing that. There's a lot of stories coming out about them mining dead bodies as well as cars on the side of the road that have been destroyed. So maybe they're doing the same thing with the supplies they're leaving behind. I'm not entirely sure. Moving on to the next picture, we can see some kind of Russian I'm not really sure what that thing is. Anyways, it's a picture of it. I'm gonna let the comments sort out what that thing is, because I bet a lot of y'all are better experts on certain kinds of niche things in the Russian army that I might not know about. So let me know in the comments what that thing is, and we'll get around to it during the questions. Also, here we can see some kind of little bunker made out of supply crates. Hopefully they were filled with ammunition when the Russians were there, because that would have gone up like a Roman candle, but I feel like they probably took them all out and just used the boxes instead. In the next picture, we can see crates that appear to be holding 127 millimeter rockets. I was going to call them shells, but they're just really rockets, which is very interesting, but a lot of them look to be torn up. In the next picture, we can see more crates of the rockets. Looks like really the same line of crates, just from a different angle. The next picture after that, once again, more rockets. After that, we can see more pictures of these rockets that have been captured. Now we can see a tree line that looks like it's littered with debris from the Russian FOB that was there. Now we can see, I'm not exactly sure what this is. We're going to skip on that. It's some kind of paper that looks like they were doing math on. Let's see. Let's see if we can catch anything here that may tell us what this is. Yeah, I'm wanting to say it's probably something pertaining to supplies, because why else would you do math? Well, maybe it's artillery. I don't really know. There's a lot of artillery stuff around, you know, shells, rockets, and such. So maybe it's math for the artillery. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not really acquainted with the formulas and equations that are used for the artillery, so I'm not really sure. We're now going to move on to the next sheet of paper, where we see it looks like they tried to burn this one, but it looks like the top part, the part that actually counts, is still intact. And I'm not really sure what that says, but I'm going to leave this on screen for a few seconds so that way anyone in the chat who can actually read Russian can tell us what this says. Also, nice handwriting, by the way. And now we're going to move on to the last picture, where we can see some abandoned Russian boots. I know that someone will put these to good use. They look like they're in pretty good condition, actually. So anyways, that's all the pictures we've gotten from this abandoned camp. And I would have to say that that's pretty reasonable evidence to back up that the Russians have retreated. Otherwise, the Ukrainians wouldn't have made it into that camp, even in that condition. We're now going to move on to the Kyiv area, where we've gotten some more news today. We're going to start off with the damage that has been seen in Borodyanka. A decent amount of pictures have been coming out of the damage in Borodyanka, but I still feel it's important to show the aftermath now that a lot of journalists and photographers can get around on the ground in there because it's safe, and they can show us the extent of the damage. As you can see, this is two pictures of the same skyrise that looks to have been obliterated, most likely with civilians inside, unfortunately. Here's the third perspective of it. Now they've moved on down the street to a house that's been completely destroyed as well. In the next picture, we can see just wreckage and obliteration, loads of trash on the streets, most likely blown out from the buildings that were hit, as explosions kind of create this weird like pressure difference inside of a building versus outside of it that leads most objects inside the building, like paper, to just fly out of the building. Interesting stuff, but I don't really know the exact explanation for it. I just know that that's something that always happens. Like if you look at footage from 9/11, when the aircraft hit the towers, afterwards it was like a pressure difference in between the inside of the building and the outside. Papers just flew out of the building and were just littering the streets around. Very, very odd, a very interesting phenomenon nonetheless. Now moving on from that, we can see a burned out Russian truck, I'm assuming, which says Prohodna net. I know net means no, but I don't know what this means. So if someone could tell me what that first word means, I'd be highly appreciative. Now moving on to the next picture, which appears to be some kind of destroyed or burned out store. The next picture after that, looks like we have an amputee with only one leg left, and he is using his crutches to walk through the debris and damage of the vehicles. And then finally, in the last picture, we can see another destroyed building. As you can see, the damage has been severe, and you can also see the pockmarks of shells in the building next door to this one, which suggests, and they look actually kind of large, maybe a BTR or a BMP fired at that building at one point with the 30 mil. But nonetheless, the damage is severe. But it's good to know that the Russians have withdrawn from that area, and they will probably not be coming back again. Although I can't give any guarantees on that, of course, because we don't really know what the Russians will be planning next. So now moving on to the Bucha Hostomel airport area. President Zelensky did travel through the area today and take a look at the damage. But anyways, I didn't include that because the footage was incredibly long, and so a lot of people don't like watching long footage on here, and also I'm not really sure if it's quiet or not. So I have something better, actually, which is a witness to the war crimes, and she actually tells her story of what she saw during the crimes that occurred in the Bucha Hostomel airport area when the Russians were in control. So I'm going to let y'all see this video. It's a speech-to-text video, and she pretty much just explains what she saw and what occurred to her in her own words. So I'm going to let y'all watch the video.
На скамейку сказав на вулицю не виходь ні шагу, бо я виконаю приказ, а ти знаєш, який у мене приказ. А потім, щоб предстрашить, сказав, я тебе хату сожгу. Кажу, зачем? І все. А отут же страшне стріляли. Отут же страшне. Скільки вони в дворі стріляли, що вони тут робили. А я на лавці сиділа. Мені аж невдобно, це мої такі сусіди хороші. А як воно там случилося, я не знаю. Що повбивали. Оця жіночка, що з чоловіком убили, вона півгодинки, як вийшла від мене, і її вбили. Ой, це звірства, я вам скажу, молодий чоловік. Ви
So that's the end of the video, but you can hear her account her own stories of what the Russians did to her and the people around. And I gotta say, it's terrible stuff when you really hear it. And especially knowing that there was a lot of people killed, but a lot of people also survived through it. And they're going to live the rest of their lives, much like the Slavs of World War II who were living inside of Belarus and Russia, and the Jews who lived in the ghettos in World War II in Nazi Germany. And they're going to live with that kind of memories in their mind, and that's got to, it's not even a question of that's got to, it's going to leave a mark on them as like people, because they're not going to come out of this as the same kind of people. That's something that everyone always says, is that once you see something hard like that, you're just never the same, because it kind of changes your view on the world and how things are. And I gotta say, it's terrible for that poor old lady who was just probably living a normal life and had never seen the brutalities or the terror of war, and now she has that on her mind. It's unfortunate to see, and I hope that the Russians who committed those dastardly crimes actually get held accountable for their actions, and that justice is brought on them. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news. This actually came out on day 40, hence the dark gray and blue marks. I'm switching in between the two because I didn't cover yesterday's news, and so I'm covering some of that as we go. Here we can see from yesterday, there was a video that came out that one of the Russian soldiers killed in the Bucha Hostomel airport area was apparently so greedy to get his hands on some kind of loot, however he could, that he actually took out the armor plate and his body armor and replaced it with a MacBook. You can see the damaged and kind of warped MacBook that they pulled out of the body armor. There's no body in this video, so it's not anything graphic. But here, nonetheless, here is the footage of that.
Бомба, нахуй. Думав, блядь, зараз собі з мародерів пластину сепарську, блядь, з броніка, блядь. Витягую, блядь, з броніка пластину витрушую, блядь. Вона, короче, блядь, вот така. Думаю, ніхуя
So
себе,
here's the
двойна в
MacBook.
них пластина, блядь, інтересно. Перевертаю на другу сторону. А це ніхуя не бронік, блядь. Течмо, витягнуло бронепластину, блядь. І бронепластину засунуло, блядь, вместо неї. Засунув собі MacBook. От такі ребята. От такі, блядь, вояки були в Кацапі. Бомба.
So you gotta say that was pretty goofy of the guy to replace an armor plate with a MacBook. That tells you a lot about that specific soldier. It doesn't look like he'll be around to really learn what it meant, but it looks like he kind of learned the value of having an armor plate instead of a MacBook in your plate carrier. Anyways, we're going to move on to the next bit of news where we can see a lost dog found its owner in Bucha, and it was a sweet little video. The dog was really excited to see their owner, and it's a sweet little glimpse of like joy in an area that's had nothing but bad news recently. So here's the video. Isn't that sweet? That's just cute. I love that. I'm happy to see that at least something good is coming out of the Russians getting out of the Bucha Hostomel European area. Because we've been getting nothing but doom and gloom news about the war crimes that they've committed there. And it's good to see that at least there's a small little glimmer of happiness that's come out of this, like the dog and the man being reunited with each other. It's a sweet little thing. Of course, it doesn't make up for all the bad things that have happened, but it's just good to know that there are some happy little moments coming out of such a terrible war. So we're now going to move on from that out of the front. Can you believe this? I mean, like, there's no more me talking anymore, and there's no more questions that really can be answered about. Is the 40-mile long convoy going to do anything? What do you think about the counterattacks near Kyiv? That all stopped. It's over. I mean, like, even in Chernihiv and over here on the eastern front near Brovary and Novobasan, it's all over. The Russians have just completely pulled out of there. And so I actually don't have much to talk about in the northern front anymore. And I think the schedule, as well as the questions, are going to kind of change in their format because I don't have a northern front to discuss anymore. So there's going to be no northern front from here on. There may be the occasional news, but it's not going to be enough to make it an entire like section of the video. So with that, we're now going to start moving on towards the location unknowns, the eastern front in general, and then it's kind of meshed with the southern front. So we're still going to divide up the eastern front and southern front like it used to be. But for now, we're going to take a quick break to answer about 3 to 5 questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
So good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you once again. We do have quite a few questions already stacked up. So we're going to start off with our first one from Andre Tikak. I believe is how you say it. Hopefully that's the way you say it. He puts in a donation of $130. Thank you very much for that generous donation. And he says, "Hi from Toronto. I really appreciate you taking the time to cover Ukrainian war objectively. As a Ukrainian Canadian, I really appreciate it, and glory to Ukraine."
Well, good Lord. Thank you so much for the generous donation. That really, generous donations like that, and anyone's donation, really, any amount helps. Always helps this channel go on because it helps me to think in the future and think about videos and streams and improvements to the streams. And so I thank you so much for the huge donation. Also, I'm very glad to hear that you do enjoy the news. I am, of course, pro-Ukrainian. I'd like to make that clear. Some people say, oh, you're not really a neutral reporter because you're like pro-Ukrainian. I am pro-Ukrainian, but I do try and keep my assessment neutral in a way. And if I say that the Ukrainians are going to whip their, butts, not to cuss on stream or anything, but if I say they're going to whip them or something, then that's just an unbiased assessment of the situation. We can actually see that apparently it was a truthful assessment because that's what happened in the entire northern front. So I thank you once again. And could you read back the last part of that question real quick, Matthew, to make sure I cover every bit of it?
So he said, as a Ukrainian Canadian, I really appreciate it, and glory to Ukraine.
So I thank you very much once again for the support. It means a lot to me that you do enjoy the stream, and I'm very glad that you've helped us out in making sure that we can continue to bring the news every single day. And so thank you very much once again for the huge donation. And with that, we're going to move on to 2 more questions, and then we're going to return to the location unknown news.
Okay, and next up we have a question from Orlos the Droid. He puts in a donation of $50 and says, Matt, this is for the family. Pay a bill or buy some food. All my love, my respect, and admiration. Keep up the fire.
Thank you very much for the support to Matt. He's definitely going to enjoy it a pretty good bit. And so I thank you so much for the support. It means a lot to us again, and it does help us to run this channel. And so with that, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to start covering the location unknown and Eastern Front news.
And next up, we have a question from Ruben Coolidge, who puts in a donation of $20. He says, I hope you enjoyed your day off. As always, thank you. And also thank you to the mods for everything. Keep up the great work, and Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraina, and thank you so much for the support once again. It makes me so happy to know that people do enjoy the news and do tune in and spend a lot of time watching these streams. I know they get really long. I'm sorry about that in advance. But with that, I thank you so much once again. And now we are going to get back to the news, starting off with the location unknowns for day 40. First off, we can see a Stugna hit a Russian tank with the Stugna crew in the footage, which is kind of rare. Usually we only see the screen. And now in this footage, we've actually seen both the Stugna and its command unit and also the crew that's using the Stugna, which is really interesting. Also, this footage came out a while ago. It was like mid-March, but the thing is that I haven't seen this footage uploaded until now, and so it was included as a yesterday thing because that's when it was uploaded, but this was like weeks ago. But anyways, it was very interesting footage to see, and also there's snowfall, which tells you that this was a long time ago. But here's the footage nonetheless.
Yeah, man!
Good stuff to see them cheer as they take out another Russian tank and ensure that the Russians aren't making any kind of ground without serious losses. So it's a good thing to see, of course. I'm glad that the Ukrainians still hold their ground. And now we're going to move on to the second bit of location unknown news. We didn't get a lot of location unknown news for yesterday. The reason why is because today, like, there's only so many points I can cover. I figured out it's around like 35 to 40. And so I couldn't get like all the news from yesterday, and today I could only get like the best bits of the news. And so that's why there's so little location unknowns for day 40, because I wanted to make sure that we were up to date with what happened this very day. So moving on from that, we can see in this video, Russians under artillery barrage. This, of course, did happen yesterday, not today.
Да хуя еще вчера хуёво пиздец. Все хавают.
Of course, we don't know where this was, but if I had to take any assumptions where this was, I'm guessing it may actually have been Mariupol, but, you know, we have no evidence to back that up. This could be any Ukrainian town, for that matter, and of course that's why it's under the location unknown. So we're now going to move on to day 41, where we've seen a decent amount of interesting news come out that's location unknown. We saw a crazy solo tank ambush by a Ukrainian tank on a Russian armored column. This is the craziest footage I've seen of like tank on tank action in this war, because this is something straight out of a movie, especially with the aerial footage. So I'm going to let y'all see the video. It is something, I have to tell y'all. Anyways, I'm not going to say too much. Here's the video. All the Russian tanks have a Russian flag above them, and the Ukrainian tank has a Ukrainian flag above it. But anyways, here's the video. So you can see, also I wanted to point out the Ukrainian tank because it is kind of hard to see. It's right here where my mouse is circling. So that's where the Ukrainian tank is. It is the only tank here, as far as I know, in this video. Also, you can see here, the tank fires. And it looks like the first shell missed. The second shell does not miss. You see, it went through the wall, kind of, but it still hit the tank. Now we can see that APC is burning out. It looks like the tank in front of it, somewhere up the convoy, actually got hit as well, because it looks like it's having some kind of smoke or fire near the engine bay. But anyways, the column starts to slow a little bit, but they're still going at a okay speed. Also, there's some kind of embers or sparks flying out of that building. We can now see a BTR shooting in the general direction of where the tank may be. But that, of course, won't save it because this tank is lying in wait. And then all of a sudden, give it any second now. Bam. I think it missed. Not exactly sure, but you can see the BTRs are trying to pass by as the tank is once again firing back into the convoy. Well, you can see that that BTR-82 is now firing in the direction of the tank. Now it looks like most of the Russian infantry have now dismounted the vehicles and are now trying to make for the side of the road, probably in a ditch. We can now see some kind of mushroom cloud where an explosion has occurred. Oh, stand by. Got the video load. And the convoy keeps on moving. I'm not exactly sure where the Ukrainian tank is in this footage, but we can now see artillery flying around the convoy and trying to hit it, at least in the rearward part. Looks like the artillery is now a little off the mark because most of the convoy is well ahead of it. But we can see here... Ooh, yikes. I'll have to back that up a little bit. But we can see in the last part of the footage that one of the BTR-82s was taken out, which is, of course, good to know. Interesting to me, and I'm sure that it's actually very hard to operate a tank at closer ranges, especially when firing at a moving target. But it was very interesting to me because out of the 3 shots it appeared that this tank fired in this footage, it only hit 1. It missed the other 2 out of the 3 shots. Interesting to me. Maybe someone who has some experience in armor in the comments can maybe enlighten us a little bit as to how difficult it is to hit moving targets at an incredibly close range. Also considering that it looks like the only path he could fire through was in between these 2 houses where they have a clear line of sight as to if a vehicle is passing through. So maybe he didn't have enough time to react to fire on time. There's a whole bunch of variables here, but nonetheless, it was an incredibly interesting video to watch from an aerial perspective, a Ukrainian tank at close range firing onto a Russian convoy. We're now going to move on to the next location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian heavy artillery in action. Apparently, they said they're shelling Russian positions with a 152mm Mitsubishi. Let's pull up a Mitsubishi because I want to make sure that I'm not thinking about the wrong thing here. Okay, yeah, it's correct. For some reason, in my head, I wasn't going to allow myself to say that anything was a Mista except for the Mista SPG. So, interesting enough, there actually is just a field artillery piece called a Mitsubishi, which is neat. But anyways, here's the video. Now that is a gun. Something is really interesting to me. Kind of a little bit of an opinion here, but something is just incredibly interesting to me about field artillery pieces. It's kind of like a in the modern sense, you know, it's a very antiquated kind of warfare, fighting with towed artillery pieces. You know, that goes back all the way to the era of, golly, I mean, like, that goes back a long time, all the way back to, like, to the 1500s with sakers and such, and we still see field artillery pieces being used hundreds of years in the future, although incredibly updated from their earliest form, but still so interesting, because a lot of stuff that was used in, like, the 1500s, at least in principle, have kind of disappeared, like cavalry and, you know, such things like that, but the field artillery piece still exists. That's a very interesting thing to me, at least in how technology has progressed, that this is still something viable and usable on the modern battlefield, and it's not having to be attached to an SPG for maneuverability, and this kind of stuff is still feasible and usable. Just really interesting. Sorry for the aside there, but we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russian version of Hellrider, as this Russian tank, which appears to be completely embroiled in flames, is still under the control of the driver, and the driver is trying to move as fast as possible from the area they were probably hit from. Anyways, here's the video.
Закрой! Наоборот. Ты хочешь запах солярки услышать?
There it is.
Ё-моё!
Американцев российский. Тут тоже российский. Сука.
Anyways, you can see the Russian Hellrider there, which weird. I mean, you know, it's not unheard of. Of course, tanks can catch fire and still be operational, but it's just crazy to see that one because it looks like something straight out of a movie. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the slow motion footage of a Malka SPG on the Ukrainian side firing. The date of this is unknown, but the footage for me came out today, so I included it in today's news. But it was just very interesting to watch the whole entire action of the artillery of the SPG firing in slow motion. So here's the video. Very interesting stuff to see. It's much like, really, everything is kind of like a rifle and how it works, and this is much like watching the slow motion of a bullet exiting the barrel of a rifle. I mean, like, obviously they're the same, it's just a much larger caliber, you know, at least in principle. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people like, oh, whoa, artillery is way different than guns, but you kind of get the picture of what I'm saying. They're firing a projectile out of a barrel. So in that principle, it's much the same as watching slow motion footage of a rifle firing. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the launch of Caliber missiles. The date of this is not unknown. I actually feel like this specific event happened days ago because we got footage from another perspective showing Caliber missiles being fired from mobile systems in an open field. And so I think this is the same footage, just from a different perspective, many miles away, watching the same thing unfold. So this did not happen today as far as I know. But anyways, here's the footage. Also, another thing I'm unsure about is because it's so dark, I can't tell if this is at sea or not. I feel like it's not. I feel like this is just an open plain. But that's another thing that I kind of had in my head watching this footage before. I was like, what if this isn't on land? This is at sea. I can't really tell, though. So, you know, that being said, is location unknown. So that kind of explains the whole thing. Anyways, back to the video. And so that's the end of that footage. And we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Ukrainian armored advance through an open field, and they're firing on the move. It was a really neat video, but anyways, I'm not going to explain it to you. I'm just going to let you watch it, see how interesting and neat it was. Now, this is something that's straight out of the Donbass in, like, 2014, because back in the day, during 2014, it was almost normal for the Ukrainians to advance through an open field in broad daylight, mostly because their army hadn't gone through the major transformation it's done in the past few years. Back then, it was still a conscript-focused army, had very little training, and was poorly equipped and underfunded. But after the 2014 Donbass conflict, and, you know, kind of like the cessation of hostilities, although we know that the ceasefire and the Minsk agreement wasn't really followed at all, you know, like a decent amount of fighting still occurred through the years, they started to go through major transformations in the military as to how it worked. They went from conscripts to contract soldiers. They started to try and spend more of their national GDP on the military. And it was a very interesting time because we actually watched, like, the modern day version of a new model army being formed out of what they learned in 2014. So very interesting stuff, but it's neat. It's kind of weird and kind of interesting to see them do the same things they did in 2014, but it looks like in this 14 clip, they're having much more success doing it now than they were several years ago. But we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a Tor destroy Ukrainian drone, apparently at a pretty decent altitude, but nonetheless, here's the video. As you can see, the surface-to-air missile was launched. It's now tracking the drone, supposedly, and then it hits the drone right about now. So you can see here now they're just going to show you the Tor. You know, and it's neat and all, and it's cool, but we know that the Ukrainians have captured about like 5 of these things, or more. I'm not really sure at this moment. We kind of lost count, but still, you know, it destroyed a drone. I guess it gets a little bit of credit for that. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians clearing a building. This is interesting footage, so I'm going to show it in its entirety. It is a 3-minute video, so strap in. It is a little bit of a longer one, but I will be giving a little bit of commentary here and there. I'm not exactly sure what kind of building this is. I mean, for some reason, my inclination... I'm not going to say. So now they've cleared that room and they're now moving on down the hall. Also, I like that this guy's got a silencer or a suppressor, whatever you want to call it, on his AK. Very nice. But once again, everyone likes to note, and I do have to say it is interesting, we never see optics on Ukrainian guns. Like, it's a rare thing to see. It looks like they use almost nothing but iron sights, but then again, I don't think we've seen a lot of Russian captured weapons with optics on them as well. It looks like they're using nothing but iron sights. And one does have to remember that while the United States military does use a large amount of optics, I don't think there's really any guns in the U.S. military nowadays that go without optics. Most countries don't have a $660 billion budget for the military. Most of them, like Russia, only have a $50 to $60 billion budget, and I think the Ukrainians have something around like $3 to $4 billion as their annual military budget. So I don't think they are able to actually do kind of the luxury things that the United States can do, which is equipping all of the guns with modern optics. It looks like they're still relegated to iron sights in both countries, which is an interesting thing to see, and I feel and I assume that is because of budgetary reasons. But anyways, I'm going to let the video continue. Okay, I'm going to say it now because I'm pretty sure. I feel like this is a hospital. I'm pretty sure about that because you can see the curtains for the little cubicles where they put hospital beds and such. So I feel like this was a hospital. Can't really confirm that, though. It just looks a lot like one. All right, now, okay, this is... I don't really know how people feel about this, but I would like to say this. This moment right here, you know, not trying to say anything dumb, but I'm sure that a lot of y'all do enjoy playing video games. This reminds me of clearing a building in Escape from Tarkov, which shows you, in a way, how eerily realistic games can get in the same kind of feel. Because there's a lot of tension here because, you know, they could run into Russians at any moment. And moving on from the gaming side of things, because that's dumb to relate video games to real life, you know, just saying it's very similar in at least its appearance on film. But something that's really interesting to me is that, of course, the camera has to turn around. I'm hoping there's more than just 2 of them. I'm hoping that there's at least 4 of them or so, because if there's only 2, they could get in an okay amount of trouble. But you know, I'm not a military expert. So now we're going to show you the rest of the video. Also, nice little Makarov there. So we can see that they're now moving on throughout the rest of the area. I'm very sure that this was a hospital. For some reason, I feel like that would be the case, but I'm not entirely sure, because I don't know what Ukrainian hospitals look like. I know what American ones look like, but Ukrainian hospitals may be a little... Okay, they got more than 2 guys in the group. We just saw another guy kick that door, so they got at least 3, maybe 4. So that's good to know that there's not just 2 of them. Golly, look at the size of this man. This man's like 8 feet tall. He's so tall he has to, like, bend over to get through the door. Dude, why in the world even have anyone else in there? Just send this guy in. He'll literally pick him up and walk him out. Like, golly. Okay, I'm sorry for getting, like, really blown away by the absolute size of this guy, but he makes everyone else look like little toddlers. This man is a giant. This is literally David from David and Goliath right here. And apparently he's fighting for the Ukrainians. This is weird, but that's crazy. I didn't expect to see such a huge guy in this video. Anyways, moving on from that. Look at him. He has to literally, like, kind of like shimmy his way through the door, because this guy is like literally just drank milk and ate cornbread his whole entire life. Now this guy is what we call in the South a corn-fed fella. Like, I'm not saying the full thing, because the full thing is something else, but this guy is corn-fed for sure. And I gotta say, this guy looks like he would just walk in there and bend the barrel of a Russian rifle and just fling the guy out a window. But anyways, we're gonna keep on with the video. So now we can hear fire outside of the building, and it appears that they've cleared the entire floor. Now, I hope the big man gets through the whole war, because this guy's a giant. This is crazy. But anyways, sorry about, like, the aside on this. I'm just blown, because I watched most of the video, like 2 minutes of it, but I didn't watch all 3 minutes of it, because there's a lot of time that I will waste if I watch them all the way through. So I watched them enough to see if they're good enough or not, and then I put them in. So I never got to the point of seeing this absolute giant of a man. I mean, I think Big John got out of that mine in that song, and he climbed out, and he went and joined the Ukrainian army or something. But this guy is huge. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians shoot down a Ka-52 with a Stugna. Now, I would like to give a special mention to one of my viewers who sent this video to me, because I didn't actually see it until they sent it to me, and I believe this is the first instance in the war where an ATGM has shot down a helicopter. Anyways, I'm going to let y'all see the footage. It's incredibly interesting to watch, and so here we go. Let me get this full screen. You can see the helicopter there on screen. So the Stugna has fired. It is now traveling towards the helicopter. Looks like they're trying to line it up in a way. Okay, now they zoomed in. Now they're really lining it up. Come on, get the camera up. And they hit it. Now I'd like to go back to when they all shot it yeah at the same time, because that, you know, that feeling that they got of shooting down a helicopter with something that isn't made to shoot down helicopters must have been something. Anyways, here's them shouting yeah again. Yeah! Now what a bunch of guys to shoot down a helicopter with a Stugna. Now that was something. So I've got to say, I think that was the first time in the war that we've seen an ATGM shoot down a helicopter on film that we can confirm. So that is something, I guess you could say, is like one of the historic highlight moments of this war, at least on film, kind of like the Mi-28 being shot down by the Star Streak and a couple of other films that we've seen, but that one was certainly interesting. We're now going to move on to the last bit of location unknown news, where we're going to see a Ukrainian farmer getting a BTR-82 free. All he had to do was pull it out of the Rasputitsa. So there we have it, another BTR-82 going to a lucky farmer just in time for the planting season. Hopefully it will also be in use in the harvest season. But we'll have to see if the parts supply line will be able to reach the Ukrainians. I'm sure it will, because they got plenty of scrap metal and parts lying around in the burned out tanks. So with that, we've now covered all of the location unknown news, and now it's time for us to go to the Sumy area, where today we saw a destroyed T-72 near Sumy. We're not exactly sure where around Sumy, but we know it was in the Sumy area. So here's the video. As you see, of course, good stuff. Another Russian tank was wiped out. And we see the remnants of the turret. I'm assuming that this was probably a T-72B3. Yes, it was, because we can see the ERA tiles on the turret, like so. And we can also see that all the ERA tiles that were on top of the turret apparently have exploded. I'm not really sure how. Maybe they exploded... Well, they probably exploded when the tank blew up. That'd be the most obvious answer. But, you know, we can't really say for sure. But you can see the pegs where these tiles were placed onto the tank, and now you can see that they're not there, so I'm assuming that they exploded along with the tank being destroyed. And we can see another one behind this T-72B3, a whole other T-72B3 right there. Actually, I'm not really sure if that's a B3. That may be a T-90, because it doesn't look like it has the same ERA tile layout. But nonetheless, 2 Russian tanks were destroyed in the Sumy Oblast, which is good news to see, and it's good to know that the Ukrainians there haven't fallen silent, and they are still beating the Russians a pretty good bit. So now, we are going to move on to the news that I touched on at the very beginning of the stream, where I said it looks like out of the 2 options, the one that seems more plausible is that the Russians are actually moving the forces that have retreated from the northern front to the eastern front to join in the fighting there. As today we've gotten 2 bits of footage. This one back here is kind of an extension, but we know that's not really sensible for sure, that they're just moving stuff from the northern front to the eastern front because it's so far in the country. But here we can actually see a train apparently moving from the area of Belgorod towards this town called Veluki, and it's loaded with T-72s. Anyways, I'm just going to show you all the video. And you can see that it does look like they have maybe the invasion markings on them. It looks kind of blurry, but I think those are... Yeah, I can't really tell what kind of identifying mark that is. The footage is too low. But anyways, it does look like they did have invasion markings on them, which may suggest that they are units that have been withdrawn from the northern front, and now they've loaded up the vehicles onto trains, and now they're transporting them down to the southeast. So an interesting video. It may be suggesting that the Russians are in fact repositioning northern front forces to the eastern front now that the northern front has completely collapsed. And then to add on to that in a way, it looks like they're starting to draw more forces, at least their equipment, from the eastern parts of the country. As we saw in the area of Yekaterinburg today, another transport train moving through a rail yard loaded with Mistas. Also S23Ms. And more Mistas. But it looks like they are starting to move more forces into the area. I believe, really honestly, the thing is that while we did see this train moving forces around in the eastern part of the country, that is so far away. I mean, like, a train will probably take... God, I mean, like, that would be really hard for me to estimate. I can usually estimate the short trips, like in Germany and France, pretty easily, but this is such a large area. Probably... Let me just do a straight line from Yekaterinburg to Ukraine. That is a whole 1,100 miles. So I think that would probably take a train a full 24 hours operating nonstop to get from Yekaterinburg to Ukraine. So I don't really think these units, the SPGs that we saw on that train, are going to immediately appear inside of Ukraine. And of course, you do have to remember that there are things that are involved with the railroad that you don't really think about, like crew switches, because the same crew that starts off in Yekaterinburg is not going to operate that train all the way from there to Belgorod. They're probably going to operate it about 100, 200 miles or so, and then they'll have a crew switch, and then they'll operate it another 200 miles, have another crew switch. I'm not really sure the range of Russian locomotives and how far they can travel before they need to refuel, but then that also have to be added in, and they may have to do a locomotive switch. There's a whole bunch of stuff involved, so it wouldn't just be 24 straight hours nonstop, then they drop them off. It may be like 2 days, depending on how fast they're trying to move that equipment. So I think that's more like behind the lines, way inside of Russia, kind of transporting around. Maybe they're just trying to shift some things around just in case they do need to be moved in, but I don't think that's weighing into the direct frontline situation as far as what's happening in the next few days, as far as reinforcements and new units. So we're now going to move on from the Eastern Front to the Southern Front because, you know, they've kind of meshed into two, but I'm still trying to divide them in a way. And so before we do that, we are going to answer about 3 to 5 more questions from the chat. So with that, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so next up we have a question from DC90, who puts in a very generous donation of $50. He says, Enforcer and Matt, I'm enjoying the streams, and I try to come back every night that I can. In the tank video, it looked like round 2 skipped off the rubble in front of it. Ukrainian tanks mainly do not have hydraulic gun stabilizers and are reset by hand every round.
Well, I thank you very much for sharing the information with us, and thank you so much once again for the support. It does help us out a load. And once again, I do thank you. It did look like that happened. It also kind of looked like that happened with the first one because you saw rubble kind of kick up in between those two houses, in between both of them. So I thank you so much for sharing that info with us, and thank you so much again for the support. It means a lot to me, and it helps out this channel a great deal. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And we have a $20 donation from Greg Carmen. Thank you very much for your support, Greg. We do appreciate it very, very much. Now, next comment we have is from Noisy Cricket, who puts in a donation of $20 and says, thanks for all your hard work on bringing us the news.
Well, I thank you all so much for your support, and I'm glad that y'all do enjoy the news. I try and put a lot of, well, I actually don't just try, I do put a lot of effort into this every day, and so I thank you so much for appreciating it, and I'm hoping that soon, probably within the next 2 weeks, we'll be able to push out our first video for this channel. And so I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to 2 more questions, and then we're going to return to the Southern Front news. And so what else do we have, Matthew?
Okay, and we just had a question come in from Scott Mensing for a donation of $20. He says, take Matt for a ride and you both hang your head out of a window and yell Slava Ukraine.
I think we might. I don't really know, because I actually wandered around, and I actually found people the other day who may think that Russia is the good guys. So I don't know if I get beat up by a biker gang or something. I don't really know, but we might, you know. So I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on back to the news in the Southern Front.
And the last question of the segment goes to S. Moore, who puts in a donation of $15. They say, what do we do here from the butchers of Bucha? Do we know what unit was in Bucha? The sockeye salmon in the Pacific met with their cousins from Kamchatka for a parlays. They don't understand murders.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And to answer that question, we do know the unit that was inside of the Bucha Hostomel Irpin area. I don't know the exact name, but I know that the Ukrainians had them encircled in that pocket. And so I think that they actually wiped that unit out entirely. Or that unit managed to conduct a breakthrough and part of it survived and made it back to the Russian lines and then retreated with them. But I think the Ukrainians do have a generally good idea of who was in charge of that unit and who they're going to hold accountable for war crimes after this war is over. And so I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer your question. Unfortunately, I can't get the exact details yet because I don't know the exact name of that unit yet or what they did. But I do know that the Ukrainians probably have a generally good idea. Also, another interesting thing, not to get into an aside too long, but to share some information I found out today about the war crimes committed inside of the Hostomel Irpin pocket, we'll just call it that. the Russians have been trying to perpetrate the claim that the Ukrainians set this entire thing up with all the dead people, you know, the mass grave, people in the street, people in the basement, and everything. And they've been saying all this was all fake so that way they'll make us look like bad people. The thing is, though, is that people started to comb back over the Maxar satellite footage to see if they could find evidence of these dead bodies in the street, because the Russians are saying that they were dropped off there in April when the Ukrainians pretty much came back through the pocket. And then they found out that those bodies had been there since about March 14th or 17th. So that gives you a pretty good idea that the Russians flat out lie on everything. And there's clear and undeniable evidence to show that they are, in fact, war criminals and did execute these people. And it wasn't just anything recent. That was weeks ago. That was weeks ago when the Russian situation in that area was actually somewhat decent. The Bucha-Hostomel-Irpin pocket hadn't formed yet. The Ukrainian counterattack didn't actually occur until several days later, and so they just executed these people for no other reason than to just do it. There was no external pressure on them to make them do that. They just did it. So that makes it even more heinous because, you know, there was no external pressure like they were getting encircled or anything and people start freaking out. They just did it to do it, which it makes it that much worse in my opinion. But anyways, that is the end of this question segment, and we're now going to move on to the news in the southern front and the Severodonetsk area and the Donbass in general. First off, in the Severodonetsk area in the town of Rubizhny, we actually saw that the nitric acid tanks were hitting the city today. They produced this weird kind of orangish black cloud of smoke. Video is rather short. But nonetheless, it was hit. And so one thing that I was interested in earlier, and I wanted to do this on stream, is what is nitric acid? What does it do? Nitric acid, industrial uses. And let's see what they would use it for. Let's say nitric acid is used in the production of ammonium nitrate for fertilizers, making plastics, and in the manufacture of dyes. Interesting. That's very interesting. I didn't know it was actually used in the production of plastic. And I think nitric acid drinks is... Wait a minute, hang on. Let me pull this up because I think, if I'm correct, nitric acid... well, let me formulate a question. Well, no, uses. That's better. We can see everything it's used for. What are the main uses of... Okay, apparently I got that wrong. I don't know why I was thinking it was used in sodas. But I thought for some reason, I know everyone's going to get on to me for this one, but I thought for some reason nitric acid was the flavoring substance in some of the more acidic drinks like Sunkist and stuff, things that kind of like revolve around citrus flavored things. I don't know why, but nonetheless, interesting. It is an industrial product used for plastics and fertilizers. So I'm sure that the amount that actually exploded, considering that it's used to produce fertilizers, and fertilizer explodes like a nuclear bomb. If you've ever seen a factory go up that makes fertilizer, that may have been a small amount, but I'm not entirely sure, and that's all assumptions and speculation based off of some light knowledge, mostly ignorance. I don't really know a lot about nitric acid and its explosive capabilities, and I'm kind of basing that all off of what I know about fertilizer. So we're now going to move on to the southern area around the town of Severodonetsk, where we can see BMP-2s from the LPR in action and firing on the move in this video around the area. So here's this video. Wow, look at those. I mean, like, what's he hitting with those shots? Those are going into the canopy of the trees. Now it's kind of adjusting, but it's still in, like, the canopy. Now we can see an LPR tank firing. It looks like it's maybe a T-64. And then we can see an explosion near the tree line. Anyways, an interesting video. Hopefully those tanks do get knocked out. We know that the Ukrainians are widowmakers when it comes to finding a tank that the Russians or pro-Russian forces are using. So we're now going to move on to the next video we've gotten of another LPR BMP-2 in action, but this footage was taken from behind the vehicle, and so here's that footage. And so you can see that a decent amount of BMP-2s are in action. We know that BMP-2s actually have incredibly thin armor that could be pierced by a decent amount of rounds. You know, in fact, just to make it kind of like clear how easily it would be to kill a BMP-2, a 50 caliber, you know, gun of any kind. I'm not going to say like a 50 cal machine gun because, of course, there's like Beretta M82s and things like that. Can pretty much wipe this thing out if you place the shots well. You can take out the driver and such because the 50 cal will just punch through the armor. And so it kind of gives you an idea that well, I was saying tanks because a lot of people would just call these tanks if they didn't know. Armored personnel carriers aren't exactly the best armored. And I think honestly, considering how easy it is to kill a main battle tank, I think in general, armor is kind of becoming an more obsolete thing, but it is BMP-2 is nice to have around for the firepower of it, the 30 mil gun, and then some of them can be outfitted with ATGMs on the turret, like a Concours, or something like that. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of footage we've gotten in the Severodonetsk area, where we can see a Russian film about sappers clearing out an area of mines. But here's the clown business here. The cameraman is walking in front of the sappers who are looking for the mines. You'll gotta see this because you can't make this kind of stuff up. This is how goofy the Russian propaganda ministry is. Look at this. This guy is walking in front of the sappers, you know, quote unquote, actively looking for mines. This guy could be walking over a mine, according to the story they're trying to tell. But that's not the case. This is just a clear field. They know nothing's here. And that's why the cameraman's up here watching this guy clear for mines. It's silly. Like how clearly fake Russian propaganda is. This is obviously just dumb. How in the world can you walk in front? You know, I'm not going to go over it again. I know I already said that, so we're just going to move on from that. You can see how goofy the Russians are when it comes to propaganda. And we're now going to move on further down in the Donbass area to something that occurred in the Donbass. We don't really know specifically where, but a Russian convoy did appear to get hit. A pretty decent deal by Ukrainian forces. So let's check out this video. Unfortunately, it has no audio, but you can see this convoy moving down this very wide roadway with tree line around it, and the artillery starts hitting the front part of the convoy, and it looks like in the last bit of footage, we actually saw it hit a vehicle dead on, right here, you see. And you see the tanks start brewing up. We can see that they hit another vehicle. Now we see one of the tanks trying to fire forwards. Now one of the APCs, I'm assuming, has exploded near the front part of the convoy. We can see another vehicle's been hit by the artillery. We can now see another vehicle being hit by the artillery, and that one actually fell pretty close, but not dead on. Now we can see the ammo, you know, cooking up in the last tank that was hit in the video. But we could see that a decent amount of damage was actually conducted on that convoy. At least 5 vehicles were hit and disabled or completely destroyed, which is a pretty good kill rate for artillery. I'm not really one to know how exact artillery can get, but considering that the artillery is probably firing from miles away and being directed where to fire by a drone, I would have to say that that's incredibly accurate fire to take out several armored vehicles with direct hits. So we're now going to move on, further on down the Donbass, towards the area of Donetsk and Marinka, where we've seen a lot of action unfolding over the past few days. It appears that the DPR and the Ukrainians are pitched in heavy fighting for this village that is directly on the outskirts of the city of Donetsk itself. To start off the video, we can see 2 Russian Su-25s conduct an airstrike near the town of Avdiivka here in this video. You can see them out a ways. I'm going to see right there. You can kind of see them on the horizon, these 2 dots here. They then kind of pull up enough that you can kind of see them above the hill. They fire their rockets upwards, of course, to give them a good angle so that way they can fly a further distance. But then again, that decreases the accuracy of the rocket fire. We can now see them turning around. They popped some flares and chaff, most likely. And now they look to be evacuating from the area now that they fired their rockets. Still popping flares occasionally. You know something? I was just thinking, the Russians with the propaganda stuff right here, like if they were making a propaganda film about these Su-25s, they would go and place a camera exactly where the Su-25s were firing at, looking up at them, and let the Su-25s fire at it and say, look, you know, they've attacked a Ukrainian position, and it'd be clear that they pretty much attacked something that they set up. But anyways, you know, I'm not going to talk about the propaganda stuff too much. But anyways, we can see that the Su-25s are still flying away. The one highest up in altitude is still popping flares and chaff as it moves on. It is just popping loads of it. I mean, like it's not stopping. And now that they have pretty much cleared out of the area, they're probably a mile or two away. But it kind of looks honestly like they're really just making a large orbit back to the same location they were at. But I can't really tell you that for sure. It's hard to tell. They're just two little orbs on the camera. And so that's the end of the video. We didn't get to see what they struck. Of course, it was probably an incredibly long distance away, so we didn't see that. But we did get to see them conduct a strike, which was an interesting bit of footage. We're now going to move on to the next two bits of footage that were actually taken today on day 41, where we can see the DPR fire on Ukrainian troops in this video. With a grad, of course.
330.
Pretty common footage. We've seen a lot of footage over the course of this war of MLRSs in use, but it's still something to show and something to see because it shows the extent of how much artillery is used in warfare. Warfare, generally in modern war, it revolves around the heavy use of artillery, and as time keeps on going, you can see that each war, no matter the size, if it's a somewhat larger war, they are almost always outdoing the previous wars in the amount of explosive munitions used, whether they be bombs or artillery, and it's starting to show that the modern war is heavily revolving as time goes by and technology and resources become more abundant. The modern war is starting to revolve more and more around indirect fire that you can get out of artillery, because it can become so much more accurate due to aircraft, laser guided munitions, and such things as like a grad and MLRS, you know, although it's not the most accurate thing, it's not like pinpoint, it is going to drop all of its rockets within a specific spread, and because there's so many rockets, it'll generally hit everything in that spread. And so it's a very interesting thing to see evolve, and if you want to pull that up, go pull up the ammunition charts and facts for each war and look at the total tons of munitions used, and you'll see that most wars after World War II have usually superseded it in the amount of conventional munitions used, which is a very interesting thing. We're now going to move on from that to the next bit of footage we've gotten, which is grads firing near the city of Donetsk. They're LPR grads, much like the ones we just saw in that video, but these grads were firing at night, much like we've seen during the days, early days in the war when MLRSs were firing on Kyiv and Kharkiv almost daily, well, not daily, nightly. So now here's the footage. You can see in the footage the MLRS is firing.
Сейчас что-то будет. Еще.
And finally, the sound's reaching them of the MLRS firing. And so I'm going to cut this video short to save us time because it's nothing more than the report from the MLRS reaching them, because it takes, of course, time for sound to travel. But that's pretty much the rest of the video. You're just hearing the little booms and echoes of the report of the rockets being fired. And so we're now going to move on from the Donbass area, and we're going to cover the news in Mariupol, and then I'm going to kind of talk about the Donbass situation as a whole, because a lot of people are starting to say that the Russians are going to start revolving their battle plans about capturing the entirety of the Donbass region, and then their plans will pretty much, they'll say they've concluded. So we're going to revisit that, but first we're going to cover Mariupol because it's also within the borders of the Donbass. And so And also, that'll be something interesting to talk about here in a second. So we got about 5 pieces of news, 2 from day 40, 3 from day 41. And so we're going to cover the day 40 news first, where we can see, of course, nothing but footage of the Chechens in Mariupol. These Chechens are firing from cover. Once again, I have to say that since we're seeing so much footage from the Mariupol area, I'm assuming that the Russians are winning, or else they wouldn't be uploading this footage, because, you know, it'd be a hard story to keep as like a continuous thing saying we're winning, but you're really not. So I'm assuming they are pushing the Azov back and away in the city. And you know, I just gotta make a critique of the helmets I'm seeing these days. I don't know what's up with these helmets. I wish someone could actually explain to me how these helmets are better than older helmets, because they cover so little of the head. They only cover the top of the skull and the back. And, you know, I mean, it's more lightweight, probably. I mean, like, you've shaved a lot of material out of it. But the thing to me is that the whole wide open side of your head is just exposed. I mean, like, not, and I don't really care about gunfire. You know, who cares about gunfire? I'm thinking about artillery. Like, if an airburst shell blew up right beside you to, like, the left or the right, like, most of your head's just exposed. You know, and while you know, the main goal of the helmet, to revisit that, helmets came around in World War I to protect soldiers from artillery, like airburst shells and stuff like that, so that way their little heads wouldn't get jumbled up by shrapnel. And so that was the whole origin of the helmet. It was to prevent yourself from getting killed by airburst shells or artillery in general. And so now the helmet is like exposing a large part of your head to, you know, to shrapnel, projectiles and stuff, and I don't really understand why helmets are moving in that direction. So if someone could enlighten me in the comments as to why that is the thing these days, because I don't really know why. Anyways, I'm gonna let the video continue. Alright, and so I just looked at the chat and I saw a lot of people saying it provides room for comms. But I mean, yeah, I could kind of see that, you know, because if you're having to thin out the Kevlar to make room for comms, I guess that wouldn't make a lot of sense, because then you might as well just shave all the material off. But, you know, I mean, like, the thing is, though, is that if it's making room for comms, I don't see any comms on this guy's head. And so why does he need the helmet, you know? But anyways, I just got a lot of questions about it. I don't really see the sense in it. You know, you could probably just shape a helmet where you still have the same amount of protective value, but you can somehow make the room in it for a comm set. You know, the helmet might look large and bulky, but at least it'll be effective and also provide a little bit of extra in terms of communication abilities. But I don't think this guy has a headset to make this even useful in the first place. But anyways, we're going to move on from that. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news we've heard in Mariupol, which we can see, of course, more Chechens in Mariupol. This was, of course, taken on April 4th. That's why it's marked blue for day 40. I forgot, it's got the copyrighted music. So you can see them all here having like a chit-chat. You know, of course, they're saying they're under fire, but for some reason they're mostly standing in the open, you know, kind of like having a picnic. And then when they run up to this block, they act like they're under fire. But you can see this guy right here was standing right by him just all day. And here's another guy, okay? We're talking about comms and stuff. Look, he's got no comms, and they're wearing these little helmets that give them no protection whatsoever. I don't understand the point of it, because of the now that I know that the point of that is to make room for comm systems, why would you wear that if you're not wearing a comm system? It's trying to look like, I feel like they're doing that to just look modern because these helmets are now in vogue, but it doesn't really make any sense for them. Anyways, I'm gonna let the video continue. Okay, wait a minute. I think this guy's actually wearing... Nope, he's not. He's wearing the little helmet. He's wearing the one that makes room for the comms they just don't have. Now we see this guy firing an AT. an RPG-7. Now you see this guy run up. Now this guy fired another RPG-7. Now this guy runs up, and he always got to follow it up with a little bit of fire. Now you can see, oh, this was about to be a live leak right here. You can see, because this guy goes running up, but this guy was going to literally follow behind him and stare down the tube like, did you get him? But then he saw, then he thought, wait a minute, my head will literally turn into jello if I do that. And so then he started backing away. You see right there, he almost killed himself though. That was about to be a bad situation for that little guy. Now we're going to move on to the April 5th news, where we can see a Russian heavy mortar moving through Mariupol. What's really interesting about this heavy mortar is that it has a vehicle attached to it, because a lot of the heavy mortars we've seen before in this war have been towed behind like a motorcycle or a car or a truck, and now we're seeing them pull in heavy mortars that are so large they actually have their own vehicles, and this little mortar is attached to it, and it just lifts downwards behind it, and it has a large base plate. I've operated the 3-inch Stokes before, so I'm sorry if I don't really get the terms right. It's just that, you know, I haven't worked around a mortar for a while, but it has a large base plate, and this whole entire thing will lift down behind the vehicle. It will, you know, they will of course use the mortar, fire the rounds, and then this thing will be lifted back up onto the vehicle and move. So it's a pretty effective system for moving around such a heavy mortar. But interesting to see, we haven't actually seen any pictures of these during the entirety of the war until now. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news we've gotten in Mariupol, where we can see an SPG being used in a direct fire role in the city. Direct fire, of course, you'll see in the video, means that they're using it almost like a tank. So here's the video of that. Oh, you know, you can't make this stuff up. They fired into a building. The whole entire thing here that they're trying to show in this shot. Stand by. In that shot right there, they're trying to make the picture that they're fighting the Ukrainian army, the Azov, specifically in Mariupol, head on. Because otherwise, if they weren't close, I'm sure that this SPG wouldn't be used in a direct fire role. And out of all that, you know, they're trying to make the situation look dangerous. This guy walks in front of the tank, and he's like, stop, you're good. And it's like, what's the point of this propaganda film if you're going to include in it a guy just walking out in the open where the SPG was? Like, this stuff doesn't make any sense. I hope it doesn't make, well, maybe it doesn't make sense to y'all. I'm not going to say I hope. Let me know in the chat what y'all think about this, because I think that if this SPG is backing up, logically, the SPG is backing up because it's assuming that if it sits there, it's going to be fired on. So it wouldn't make any sense for this guy to walk out of cover to then walk in front of the tank, well, the SPG, where it was, to tell it to stop. Because now he's going to be seen by the Ukrainians, and he's going to be fired on. So this doesn't make any sense to me at all. Let me know in the chat what y'all think. We're now going to move on to the last bit of news inside Mariupol, and then we'll talk about the Donbass as a whole, where we can see Russian tanks in Mariupol. Of course, in action from a drone. Of course, it's got the ugly RT watermark on it. But here we can see one of the Russian tanks. It appears to be some kind of T-72B3. It fires, of course, probably into an empty building. We're probably about to see a director come out and say, listen, I didn't like that shot. Could you do it again? As you can see, it's not being backed up by infantry. There's no infantry anywhere in this video. We don't see any movement out there in the distance. We don't see anything. It's just this one tank in a torn up city firing at buildings. That's always weird to me, and it always raises a lot of questions whenever I see a tank on a street. You don't see any infantry around whatsoever near this tank. It's almost up there on its own. And now once again fired into another building. And now the drone's going to pan out and show you the wonders of the Russian military and how much damage they've actually caused to the city. As you can see, almost every single building has taken damage of some kind, some of them much more than others, some to the point that they will never be used again. They'll have to be demolished after the war. And the Russians are proud of this, you know, that's why they filmed this. Russia Today puts this up on the news in Russia. And they're proud of showing the city being leveled, and they're probably explaining that this is what has to happen. You know, we've seen the Russians in interviews throw out slurs about the Ukrainians, and they obviously don't view the Ukrainians as equals, because they executed loads of them in Bucha and Irpin like they were some kind of animals for the slaughter. So it kind of shows you the position that the Russian media is now starting to take, is that they're now starting to show the destruction openly and be proud of it, like it's a Russian achievement. So we're now going to leave the area of Mariupol. Once again, I do have to give the disclaimer before we leave the area that the Azov is still holding. We don't know how long they're going to hold. So far, they've held for like 38 days, 37 days or so. I mean, like, this city was pretty much encircled within the first few days of the war. And so they've been holding an incredibly long time. And we don't know how much longer they're going to hold, but so far I think they've done their purpose. They've eaten up time and resources that the Russians could have used elsewhere. And so if the city does fall now, because I think the Azov even knows that there's no saving them now. They're just too far gone. I think too much of the city's been taken, and the Azov has taken a pretty decent amount of losses. So I think the city will fall within the next few days or so. But I could be wrong. We haven't seen the city fall yet. I have said that about 2 times before, and both times they've made me eat my words. So I don't know. It may hold for a long time. But now we're going to talk a little bit about the Russian strategy that everyone else is starting to say is going to happen now, which is that the Russians are going to divert their forces down to the southeast, take the entirety of the Donbass. They were going to put everything into taking the Donbass, and then they're going to try and negotiate with the Ukrainians and say, we've accomplished our objectives, and the war is over. I think, you know, this is nothing more than my interjection, but I think that is something that may happen. That may be a likely possibility, because right now the Russians have nothing to claim as a success, rather than the southern area here where they've connected Russia with a larger land bridge to Crimea. That's the only thing they've done that seems something of an accomplishment. If they managed to take the Donbass, which is kind of them following through on the Donetsk and Luhansk thing that they started in the Donbass in 2014, I think that they actually may try and go for that, so that way they can say that we've liberated the Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine for the large part from Ukraine, and now we've secured our objectives. We've gotten rid of the fascists that were oppressing these people. So I think they might go for that, at least in a political stance, because they do have to try and save face somehow, because the war's gone terribly for them. So they may try that, although it'll probably be at a heavy cost to them. Another thing I could see them doing is that I could see them trying to renew the offensive on Kharkiv, and also renew the offensive on Zaporizhia. These 2 cities here alone, and Zaporizhia will become the new Kyiv in a way, and maybe... that's a little bit too much of a stretch. I was going to say they were maybe going to try and shoot around Zaporizhia, encircle it, and then go for Dnipro. But there's no way to encircle Zaporizhia unless if you drove through the city, which means you captured it. So I think it'd just be kind of like a halfway siege of Zaporizhia, kind of like what's going on in Kharkiv. They're going to try and renew their assault on Kharkiv again, at least if we're going with the old style of how the Russians were doing it at the start of the war. And they're going to try and force the Ukrainians into some kind of peace agreement by putting a large amount of their population at risk. I don't think that's going to work, and I think when you put those 2 plans side by side, that capture the Donbass or go for Zaporizhia and Kharkiv, it seems like the more reasonable one would actually be the Donbass the Donbass capturing in a way. So I think those are going to be the 2 strategies we might see the Russians go for, and we're just going to have to wait and see in the coming days which one it looks like is actually going to be taking place. So that's kind of my stance on what's going to be happening in the Donbass, or the Eastern Front as a whole. And so we're now going to move on to the last bits of news we've gotten before we move on to international news, where we've seen a Smerch firing towards Mykolaiv in Kherson, and then we actually have footage of explosions and artillery fire landing inside of the city of Mykolaiv. So here's this footage. I'm actually going to rewind it so that way you can see it from the very start.
делается. Ебать скорость. Сейчас блядь.
And so, of course, it's nothing more than another MLRS firing on film. But now we're going to move to the area of Mykolaiv. I don't think these two events are actually connected because the fire in Mykolaiv actually looks like it occurred during night. But anyways, here in this footage, we can actually see... Well, actually, wait a minute. I'll revisit that here in a second. But in this footage, you can see large explosions occurring in Mykolaiv. It does appear that it may have been at night. Yes, it was at night. You can see it's pitch black out. So I don't think this was the exact smirch in that film, but it may have been a smirch that was firing at the city during the nighttime. So the fire is coming in right now. You can actually see it's occurring right in front of the camera. So that's the end of that footage. Of course, you could see the large explosions in the distance. I'm not really exactly sure what kind of artillery or bombs that was. Obviously, it wasn't a cruise missile. They don't all come in that many in one small area. And of course, the explosions would be even larger than that, most likely. So we don't really know a lot about what happened here. We just know that another artillery strike has occurred on Mykolaiv, which is very interesting because Mykolaiv isn't even on the front anymore. It's actually about 15 miles behind it or so. So I don't really know what they're bombarding Mykolaiv for because they're not even actively assaulting it right now. So we're now going to move on to the next bit of news we've gotten from Mykolaiv, where we can see the ambulance yard of a children's hospital being hit. You can actually see one of the projectiles go straight through the roof of this ambulance here in the thumbnail. And so here's the footage. As you can see, this is clearly some kind of motor pool for all the ambulances at this children's hospital. And so you can see that the explosive projectile landed near the yellow ambulance and caused a decent amount of damage to it. I believe this is actually the only explosion on the footage because I watched this about 3/4 of the way through and it just looked like it was showing the aftermath of this one explosion here. But that is still dangerously close to a children's hospital because that's what they're saying this is, and I'm assuming that it is a children's hospital because we saw in Mariupol that was one of the first things that the Russians seemed to hit was the children's hospital. So you can see there, that's a weird thumbnail right there. I don't know where they got that from. But anyways, you can see that it hit dangerously close to a children's hospital. Don't really know if it was an MLRS strike, and I don't really know if there was missiles that hit the building that were out of frame, but we did see that one, which was dangerously close to the children's hospital. So we've actually covered all the news in the southern front today, and we're now going to move on to the Czech area and also Estonia, as we can see that they've been delivering small gifts of their own. Today, the Czechs apparently sent something like 5 T-72Ms and 5 BMP-1s to Ukraine. While a small number, I believe that's actually a very large number for the Czech Republic when you compare it to their actual stores of vehicles. Army equipment. Let's take a look at that. I know Wikipedia isn't the most trusty source. You know, there's a lot that can be wrong with it, but in the regards of trying to keep things short in terms of this stream, I'm going to take a look. So they got 30 T-72 M4s, which I think is their kind of upgraded version of the T-72, and then we can see that they have 86 T-72 M1s. So giving it 5 of them is actually a pretty big deal, and considering that they only have 20 active according to the Wikipedia page, that is something like 1/4 of their tank force that they've given to Ukraine, which is a very big deal. We can also see that they have 145 BMP-1s. They actually have less of these than they do BMP-2s. BVP. Okay, it's a BMP. I was like, what in the world's a BVP? Anyways, they gave about 5 of these as well from what we know. They may have given more, but in the footage of the supplies that were given from the Czech Republic to Ukraine, there was only 5 T-72Ms and 5 BMP-1s, so I'm assuming that that's all they gave them. They may have given them more, and they may be keeping that a little bit more hush. But still, nonetheless, an incredible donation from the Czechs, considering they don't have much to give in the first place. We're now going to move on to Estonia, where we could see that they are apparently packing and shipping presents for the Ukrainians and the terms of towed artillery pieces. I think that these are probably 105 millimeter artillery pieces. I'm not entirely sure about that. I'm not a huge buff on the Estonian military equipment, but we can pull up Estonia Army equipment and take a look at what they have in their stores based off of the Wikipedia page, of course. Again, sorry if that drives a lot of people crazy, but that is something I try and do, is look at what this is. So this looks like, if we had to compare it to anything, this looks like this gun here, I think. Let me look at that again. Okay, it does look like it has 3 legs. It does have the same kind of wheels, doesn't it? Yes. So this appears to be an H-63, which is a 120 millimeter howitzer that was made by the Soviet Union originally, and it looks like they've purchased 42 of them from the Finns. So 3 of them is once again a very large number for a country like Estonia to give, because they don't have a lot in the first place. So we can see that in terms of the size of the gifts given by the Czechs and the Estonians, it actually is a pretty big number, although their armies are incredibly small. It's a great gesture of friendship that they've given to the Ukrainians in their struggle for their own freedom. And so with that, we've actually covered all the news today that we've gotten from around Ukraine and around the world. And so with that, we're going to move on to the questions. And before we do, Matthew, how many do we have?
So for super chats, it looks like we're sitting at just about 25, and for the other questions we have, it looks like we're sitting at about 15.
All right, so let's get to the first question.
So real quickly, I want to recognize 2 donations left without comments. We have a $50 donation from Charles Gregor and a $20 donation from Scott Mensing. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. Next up, we have a comment from Duan Champ 1988, who puts in a donation of $20. He says, do you think Putin means to take out the right sector or fascist government leadership along with the Azov battalion when he said denazify?
I think so. And Matthew, you might want to pull a little bit further away from that mic because we can hear you breathing. But to answer that question, yes, I think that that's what he may have meant by denazify in a way. Although I would be kind of careful with that term, because it appeared that initially it looked like the Russians were going for a full annexation of the country. So I don't think it had limited goals in terms of what they were specifically going for. I think they were looking for overthrowing the country's government and installing a puppet government that would suit their needs and interests in the area. So I hope that answers that question in a pretty good regard. And thank you once again to the 2 donors that left just, you know, a donation and nothing in terms of comments, and also to you as well, because these kinds of questions, along with the support that you give through super chats to this channel, helps us to run and plan for the future. Also, because I forgot to mention this a little bit, kind of an aside, we are looking at a merchandise line maybe being up by this Friday. Of course, it's not going to be anything like Funker 530 where you make like Ukrainian stuff and then sell it. It's going to be nothing but channel merch, because I think putting pro-Ukrainian stuff on merchandise and trying to sell that's kind of war profiteering in a way. So if you know, the merchandise is going to be entirely supporting the channel, but we will donate proceeds of it to charities that we put up on the channel. And so I thank you all so much for the support once again. I hope you all do enjoy the merchandise we come out with. They look pretty nice so far as what we're looking at and planning. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next question.
And the next question that we have is from Ryan Shipovich, who puts in a donation of $18. He says, in both winter Chechen wars, Russian lost and then sued for peace, used downtime to regroup and learn from mistakes, then attack again and win. If West pushes bad peace deal on Ukraine, how long till Muscovites attack again? Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine. And to answer that question, I'm not entirely sure. Also, Matthew, one thing, I can hear everything. Like, I can hear a little bit of like the air in your room. Just want to let you know. But to answer that question, I think, well, actually, to kind of assess the Winter War a little bit more, what you're talking about is the Continuation War, which, although I do like to say that I am on the side of the Finns in the Winter War, the Continuation War was started by them in kind of like concurrence with Operation Barbarossa. So they didn't actually regroup and then attack the Finns again. The Finns attacked them, and then in the process of that occurring, they then counterattacked the Finns later on in the war towards 1944, 1945. In the Chechen War, that was a little bit different because there was a huge amount of downtime, but Yeltsin pretty much left Chechnya alone during the rest of his presidency after the terrible defeat in the first Chechen war. And then when Putin got in charge, because he has these kind of nationalist ideals, he started to say Chechnya is Russian and it belongs under Russian control, and that's why the second Chechen war started. So it wasn't really like a regrouping thing, like that was their plan to go back into Chechnya again. Under Yeltsin, they just got beat, and that was going to be the end of it. They were like, all right, I guess Chechnya is pretty much an independent territory at this point. So decent points, but to answer the question about if we pushed them into a bad treaty, I don't think the West really has any leverage into pushing Ukraine into any kind of treaty, because while the Ukrainians are appreciative of Western support, Zelensky is making it pretty clear that he's not happy with the amount of support that the West has been giving Ukraine, saying that they could have stepped up and done more to avoid the atrocities we've seen in the Bucha Irpin pocket. So I don't really think they'll be pushing them into a bad treaty, but if they do, I think the Russians wouldn't actually revisit this unless if they were provoked to, because it's going to be an embarrassment to them, and we never saw them revisit Afghanistan, even when they withdrew. Then again, they kind of withdrew from Afghanistan in the middle of the Soviet Union collapsing as well, so that may have had a factor to play into it. But I hope that answers the question in a way, and thank you very much once again for the support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And I just want to quickly say that we just got a I repeat, a $500 donation from Gordon Buxbaum. He says, Enforcer and crew, thanks for all of your hard work, and Slava Ukraine.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, man. Golly, thank you. Wow. Damn, wow, that's something. I gotta thank you so much for that, Gordon, man. I mean, that type of stuff isn't just keeping the channel running for the next few weeks. That stuff's keeping the channel running for like months. So I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad you enjoy the streams that much. Thank you. Like, wow. Golly, wow, thank you. I can't really say more than that. So with that, just know that I am more than appreciative for the support you've given this channel. It's going to help us out a load. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, but thank you.
And thank you once again. We very much appreciate it. That's an extremely generous donation. So then our next comment is from Russ Paulus, who put in a donation of $18, if I can speak English. But anyways, he says, could the Russians be misleading the Ukrainians into thinking the north is cleared? Then the Ukrainians move their forces to the east, allowing Russians and Belarusians to head back into the north and Kiev.
I think that may be something they will try to do, but that would, I mean, really honestly, considering that we know that the Ukrainians are being fed Maxar satellite footage among many other kinds of satellite footage daily, they would see the buildup once again up here, because it wouldn't be something instantaneous without any kind of visible buildup in satellite footage. It wouldn't just be like, the Russians move to the east, the Ukrainians move to the east, and then like Russian troops just literally crawl out of the ground and start pushing back into Ukraine. They would of course have to sit up there and base for about a week or two, and that would be an incredibly quick timetable, and then they would begin their offensive again. So the Ukrainians would have time to prepare, and we do have to remember once again that the Russian logistics system can only supply about 62% of the invasion force, and that was at its peak during this war. So there's not really a lot of resources they can add. They really can't send the 220,000 soldiers that were in the initial invasion force to the east and then draw more forces from the rest of the country to then push another offensive in the north. They just simply don't have the logistic ability to do that. And we know for sure now that the Ukrainians have recaptured this entire area in the north, they were going to sabotage all of the logistical things that they can, roadways, railroads, just in case if the Russians do try and push back through the north, they can pretty much start destroying everything in kind of like a Swiss battle plan kind of move, where they would destroy all of their infrastructure to slow enemy advances into their country. I think that that's what they would start looking at in the north. And so honestly, I think the Russians have completely abandoned the north. I think they look at this as an unattainable situation now. Their strategy has changed due to the amount of losses, economic impact that this war has had on them. They're now going to start focusing on the south exclusively and trying to get something out of it. So I hope that answers your question in a way. That's kind of my opinion, and based off of public knowledge, and so it's generally an assumption. So take it with a grain of salt. It may not be true. They may do that again. But that's kind of my answer right now at the moment. So I hope I've answered that question pretty well, and you got something out of it, at least as far as what I can give. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
And our next question is from BSG Wolf, who is a longtime channel supporter. He puts in a donation of $20 and says, "Do you think Ukraine will go for a peace deal in regards to the Donbass, or do you think what has happened in the North Ukraine has enraged the Ukrainians to the point that it's total victory or nothing?"
Ah, that's a tough one to answer because a viewer did bring up, and it is a good point, that even though the Finns won the Winter War in a way, because the Russian goal of the war was to annex them, and so while the Russians did get land out of the Winter War, it's still considered a defeat for them because they didn't actually achieve their primary goals that they started out with at the start of that war. So, you know, with the historical context that Finland did win, but they still lost land at the end of it, the Ukrainian government may be looking at maybe piecing out and giving the Donbass to the DPR and LPR because that's probably what the Russians will stipulate in the peace deal. So, I mean, like, it may be a thing, but I really think, honestly, that with the success that they've faced in the North in this defensive war, they may be looking at the situation and saying, we may be able to hold this ground and just eat up Russian supplies, manpower, and resources to the point that the Russians just give up. But they may be looking at it like that now. So you kind of have two schools of thinking they could be following right now. They could be thinking, we will have to peace out because we can't keep on doing this forever. We're just going to tear the country apart, you know, in terms of like how our cities are, and then that'll just be more we have to rebuild, and we might not be able to rebuild it. Or they may be thinking, we did so well in the North, holding them off, that we can also do that down here and just force them into piecing out and getting nothing out of this war. So there's kind of two routes that this could go down that I see. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question away. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And our next question for the night is from Knuckles, who everybody knows is a longtime channel supporter. He puts in a donation of $20 tonight and says, "Did you hear about the 267 Ukrainian forces that surrendered in Mariupol today? Also, the video you showed with the 8 missiles, and you said you thought it might be an open field, was actually shot from the ocean and not land."
All right, well, thank you very much for clearing that up, Knuckles. I did say that it may have been the sea. I just couldn't really tell in the dark. So thank you for clearing that up. And I did not hear about the 267 soldiers in Mariupol surrendering today. That's some news that I haven't come across. So let's pull it up and see if anyone has reported on that. Mariupol surrender. Let's see here. Mariupol surrender video dismissed as Russian propaganda. Let's see, first major surrender of Ukrainian forces in Mariupol. That's a video. We're going to click on it, but I'm going to mute it just in case it has copyrighted footage. Interesting. Let's see here. Let's go into the comments. There's some very well-fed actors in those Marines. Wait, someone said, who surrenders with a chest full of grenades? Let's go back to the beginning of the video. Are those the grenades? Right there? Let me know in the chat, everyone, what y'all think. I can't really tell if those are grenades or not. We're going to let the video keep playing and see if we can see anything else on them. You know, because I'm not going to discredit this. A lot of people are saying this is obviously fake, but, you know, it may not be. You know, I try and give everything a little bit of the credit of the doubt. What's interesting to me, though, is I don't see any Russian soldiers moving alongside them. Wait, hang on. Why is the camera sideways? Hang on, let me take a good look at this. I can't tell. Those pockets look incredibly full, but full of what? I can't tell. Now, we don't see any Russian soldiers walking alongside them, making sure that they don't try and make a break for it. So, you know, that's kind of weird. Because you always have prisoners accompanied with armed guards, so that way they don't try and make a break for it. But we don't see any of those here. But, I mean, maybe. That might be forces that surrendered in the Mariupol area. Russian leader claims 267 Marines surrendered. Interesting. This is from republicworld.com. But a lot of people haven't reported on this, and that was reported 21 hours ago. And so I'm not really sure about that, because we haven't seen a lot of reports of that. This Express.co, I think that's kind of like a tabloid, though. It says it was propaganda. So I'm not really sure, but I hope that answers your question. And thank you so much, Knuckles, for the continued support. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quickly, I want to recognize a $12 donation from Duke Savage. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. Our next comment is from Kurt Sievert, who puts in a $10 donation. He says, "What happens when a Russian general throws a grenade at a Ukrainian soldier? The Ukrainian pulls the pin and throws it back."
That's a pretty good one. I like that. Pretty funny. Yeah, that's pretty funny. I was thinking about that for a second again, but yeah, I like that. That's kind of like what you call it, the blonde jokes that used to go around years ago. You know, where they sit there and say, I think that's like the same joke, but it's just replacing the blonde with the Russian general. You know, potato, potato, I guess. But thank you so much for the support, and it's a pretty funny joke. I have to say that was a pretty good one. So thank you so much once again, and we're gonna move on to the next question.
And our next question of the night is from Rick James. He says, "Do you think Putin may be repositioning his ground forces to open up the battlefield to use WMD without killing his own troops? Thanks to you and your team."
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy the streams. And to answer that question, I don't think so. You see, because the United States has made it clear that they will get involved. Hence the blue line up here. That's the whole reason this was drawn, is because Biden said that the use of chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons will get the U.S. involved in this war directly. And so I don't think the Russians are doing that, because that would be that's a bad move for them. The United States getting involved in any regard, it would be terrible for them. I mean, like, you know, even Putin years ago, through the years actually, has openly admitted the Russian army does not stand a chance against the United States military in a conventional war. And so their whole entire doctrine in between the United States and them relies on nuclear weapons and using them to a huge extent. And so pretty much with that in mind, if they go to war with the United States, mutually assured destruction is guaranteed within the opening weeks of that war. So I don't really think that they're planning on doing that because of the international implications. So I hope that answers your question to a pretty good deal. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Rich Hogan, who puts in a donation of $20. He says, "Always a great stream to watch and one to look forward to."
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy these streams. I try and report the best news, and I know that some people say, you know, because I do look at the comments every once in a while, I have the chat running on my phone down here, but the thing is I can't look at it too much, or else I get distracted. But I do see people every once in a while saying, "You're not neutral." I am pro-Ukrainian, but when I report the situation, like as to how the war is going, while I do support Ukraine, I do look at situations like Mariupol and say, obviously, it will fall. You know, if I was a pro-Ukrainian just through and through and just like blindly thought the Ukrainians would win no matter what everywhere, I'd say Mariupol will hold for 1,000 years. But, you know, while I am pro-Ukrainian, I do say things in their support. I do look at the situation on the ground in an unbiased view and say that things may turn out a bad way for Ukraine in certain areas and a good way in others. So I hope y'all can kind of respect, like, while I do have an opinion, I do try and keep my assessment of the battlefield situation neutral and more unbiased. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another question from Knuckles. He puts in another $20 donation and says, "Canada has started to purchase weapons for Ukraine as they cannot tap into their own supply anymore. How much longer till other countries can no longer afford to supply Ukraine?"
I don't really. Well, if the United States is involved in supplying them, I don't really think we have to worry about other countries providing the Ukrainians with weapons, because the United States has an untapped potential of producing things for people around the world. As we saw in World War II, pretty much the Lend-Lease. I mean, I know a lot of people, the modern view is that the Russians won that war on their own almost, in the United States, Britain, and other countries involved did nothing. But the honest truth is that if the United States didn't conduct a Lend-Lease and provide the Russians with hundreds of thousands of trucks that they were really too ignorant in their military planning to produce themselves, the Russians probably would have lost that war because the logistics just weren't there. They insisted on producing in World War II thousands of tanks while completely avoiding the logistical hurdles associated with producing and fielding that many tanks. So if it wasn't for the United States, and whenever you pull up a picture of Russian logistics, you'll see that it's almost nothing but Studebakers, and there's almost no gases. And if you actually look at the numbers produced, it is clear the Russians produced like 90,000 trucks. Let me get an exact number. How many trucks? And this is all to answer the question. This isn't going way off on the side. This is all going to come back to answering the question. How many trucks did the Soviet Union produce in World War II. There we go. 256,000 trucks. How many trucks did the U.S. lend lease in World War II? Hopefully we can get a specific number for Russia. So the U.S. lended 400,000. Wait a minute, is this for a specific year or is this the entirety of the war? Let's see. This is the U.S. Embassy and Consulates in Russia. Interesting that they actually have an info thing on this. Let's see. In December 1931, totaling 11.3 billion, 180 billion in today's currency, from 1941 to 1945. And so, over the course of the war, we provided the Russians with twice the amount of trucks nearly that they produced themselves. And so, to answer the question about the United States supplying foreign countries, it's clear to me that if the United States really wants to get involved in just pretty much lend-leasing vehicles to the Ukrainians, well, they're not even lend-leasing, they're really just giving them to them. We can clearly do that, because if it wasn't for us doing that in World War II, Russian logistics would have been a nightmare. They would have only had about a third of the actual supply abilities that they would have had if it wasn't for the U.S. getting involved. So I hope that answers the question in a way, kind of drawing on a historical reference for that. So while Canada may be running out of supplies, the United States has an unlimited budget and also pretty much an unlimited stockpile of weapons that we've been building up for years, and mostly pretty good modern equipment as well that we can keep on giving them. So I hope that answers the question in a way, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next one we have is from longtime channel supporter Speed Break. He puts in a donation of $18, and he says, "This is for pissing off my blonde wife. LOL. Well done."
Well, thank you very much. And tell her it's nothing personal. I'm just bringing up the past, you know. That's what we history majors do. We do nothing but bring up the past all the time. And so thank you very much once again for the support, Speed Break. I have to remember to call you that. I was about to call you your real name again. But thank you very much once again, Speed Break. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Rick James. He puts in a donation of $10 and says, "Do you think Putin may be repositioning his ground..." Wait a minute, excuse me. That one's been duplicated. My bad. The next one we have is from Polar Doom 420, who says, "I've watched you with Man for quite some time now. We both truly appreciate your efforts. Shout out to my ginger bear, LOL. Enjoy some coffee or whatever."
Well, thank you very much for the support, and we will enjoy the coffee best we can. I am trying to eyeball a way to get coffee branded with the Enforcer Channel brand, but it looks like we kind of hit some roadblocks with that right now. But we'll look into getting out a quality roast to everyone as soon as we can. Honestly, I think the channel has to grow a little bit more before then, but you know, we'll get to it when we get to it, and hopefully we can get you all some nice coffee in return. So I thank you very much once again for the support. It means a lot to me, and it does help us to continue to run this channel. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And our next question of the night is from Mr. Misha777, who says, "Thanks, Enforcer. Our family in the Kherson region today said Russian forces entered Belozerka and Kizomas, closer to the mouth of the Dnieper, searching homes for weapons and threatening outspoken Ukrainians."
Very interesting. We do know that that is something that the Russians are commonly doing. And the Bucha Hostomel Irpin area, I think that they may have been executing people who were openly still pro-Ukrainian and didn't keep it to themselves. And also maybe people, and this is kind of just me hypothesizing perhaps, people that they found out broadcasted Russian locations on social media. Hopefully that's not the case, because that means that we may be getting less and less news and less information may be reported for everyone in the world to know, and especially the Ukrainian government to know where Russian troops are. Because while satellite footage is good, live footage that is taken from the ground on the social media platform is almost like having some kind of partisan recon unit that's spread out across all occupied areas. You know, it's a resistance in a way, kind of like World War II, to cut that short. So I hope that isn't the case, because then that's really going to start impeding the Ukrainians' abilities to see what's going on, and it's also going to impede our abilities to see what's going on. So I hope that's not the case, and I thank you very much once again for the support. Also, to kind of like cross back onto the whole thing of not letting us see what's going on, we do get a very good like understanding and picture from what they send out in Ukraine about what's going on. So much so that the Russians looked like they almost copied my map verbatim at one point when they released the only official map that they have during the war. You can ask Matt, and you can also ask all the people in the live chat who were here for that. It was almost a carbon copy, which was really weird. And so hopefully they don't stop uploading that information, and the Russians aren't doing this kind of stuff, because it helps the entire world to get a very good image of what's going on, and it also allows for people outside of Ukraine to actually have hardcore proof and evidence to further the point of giving the Ukrainian support, showing what the Russians are doing in there. So thank you very much once again for the support, and while we move on to the next question, I'm going to ask you, Matthew, how many Super Chats do we have left?
So it looks like we're currently sitting at about 15 more.
All right, and with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And the next one is from Greg Carman. He says, the lesson we should learn from this, we hope that Patriot missile systems, among other things, are flooding into Taiwan.
I do hope so. I don't really think they'll be falling under invasion anytime soon, or the threat of it, because while the Chinese are always threatening invasion of Taiwan, I don't really think it's going to happen, because they've seen the economic backlash that the Russians have gotten, and they simply, is considering that China is so focused on an export economy, they simply cannot get that kind of backlash. Their economy would truly collapse under that kind of pressure. So I don't think they will be doing that soon, but I hope that we do give Taiwan a little bit of support in this whole thing. So I do agree with that, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, just real quick, I got a message from a pretty loyal viewer of the channel. They said that we just hit 40,000 subscribers. I'm not sure if that's accurate, and maybe you might be able to verify that on your end, potentially.
Let's see. Let me check that out. Hang on, everyone. Just stand by. We're going to take a look at that. Oh, we hit 40,086 subscribers. Good job, everyone. Thank you so much. 40,000 is a huge deal. 50,000 of course would be even larger, but I thank everyone so much for enjoying the content and finding it good enough that y'all subscribe. We do, to all the new subscribers and people who may be thinking about subscribing, we broadcast every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern time except for Monday, and we also run a fundraiser every Sunday for a charitable cause currently operating in Ukraine. So if you would like to, make sure to hit the like button, because it helps us out in the analytics, and also make sure to subscribe as well, so that way you can keep up to date with the news if you do enjoy what you're watching. And so thank you once again for sharing that with us. I didn't know that we actually hit 40K, and so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And our next question of the night is from Geoff L, who says, I've been out of the loop for a bit, but did I miss anything? Has that 40-mile convoy made it to Kiev yet? LOL, keep up the good work, guys.
Oh, thank you very much for the support, and the answer is no. They didn't even make it, and now they're not even there. So thank you very much for the support. You haven't missed a lot. You can go back and watch all the streams. I mean, they're like 3 hours apiece now. They're the length of a Forrest Gump film. So you can go back and check those out. There's a lot of news in there, and also a lot of questions answered as well. So thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Ruben Coolidge, who says, do you think the shift in focus to the east will make it any easier for Ukraine to push the Ruskies out, or could this be potentially prolonging the conflict?
I think that's a very tough one to answer, because we do know that the Russians have had much more success in the south than they ever did in the north. And so this may be prolonging the war, honestly. But I'm not entirely sure, because then again, if it's prolonging the war, it may just be a prolonged stalemate in between both sides, with the Russians making no progress and the Ukrainians not being able to make any counterattacks. Well, they probably will be able to in limited areas, but it won't be to as great effective as we saw on the northern front. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm not really sure, because once again, the Russians could flood the southern area with units, much like they did in the northern area with a 40-mile-long convoy, and kill the logistics, and then kill that entire front as well. So we'll just have to wait and see how the logistics really falls apart or keeps together once the new units are introduced into the southern front, if they are, and then that will give us the idea. That will be the determining factor as to how much longer this war will go on. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question in a way. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up is a question from BC Skyman, who says, do we have evidence that Ukraine is preparing for the Donbass region offensive, and will they try to help the people in Mariupol?
We know that they pretty much cannot help the people of Mariupol. The situation there is a little too far gone, and as far as I know, the defenders have actually been pushed back a pretty good bit inside the city. They don't control the ground they used to. And so I don't really know how much longer the city's going to hold and how many defenders there are left. So I think that the Ukrainians and the Azov that is currently down there have kind of signed off Mariupol as a loss. It's going to be inevitable. They're just pretty much the Alamo at this point, and they're holding on, trying to buy time and buy time for the Ukrainians. To answer the rest of the situation around the Donbass, I think that when you really look at it, I don't think the Russians, and this is not trying to be biased or anything, just historically based off of what we've seen in this war so far, and we know that they haven't learned anything because their strategies have been the same now as they were at the beginning, opening week of this war nearly, logistically. I don't think they're going to make a lot of progress even introducing more units to the Eastern Front. For example, the 40-mile-long convoy was a huge introduction of forces into the Northern Front, and we didn't see that do any good for them. We actually saw that do more bad for them than good. And so I think that may be the same situation that we're looking at in the Eastern Front as well, if they were to introduce more units there. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a comment from Trevor Smith. He says, the ammonium nitrate is also used for explosives. Hence, if they blow up the nitric acid tanks, less explosives for missiles and tank shells.
Very interesting. I did not know that. Of course, fertilizer is explosive, so I guess that's the next logical step. So I thank you very much for sharing that with us, and thank you very much once again for the support. That does mean a lot to us, and it does help us run this channel. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from DC90 who says, the helmets are designed for headsets. They are essentially bump caps and are made of Kevlar, but are designed for comms gear.
That's... we kind of already covered that, but I thank you very much once again for sending in a super chat to let me know. But the thing is, to me, is that if you're going to use that helmet, I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to be a fashionist. Well, that sounded wrong. I'm not trying to be a fashion stylist or anything. But the helmet just doesn't make any sense to me, because while it may be for comms, yeah, we covered that earlier, they weren't wearing comms, so it's like a pointless helmet to wear, On top of that, let me pull up that helmet. Modern Special Forces helmet. I'm sure that I'll find the name of it there. Let's see. There we go. Yep, that's it. That's what they call it, apparently. A modern... Okay, look. This guy is wearing a headset. Now, I don't have to school anyone on what a headset is, obviously. But this guy's wearing a headset, so it makes sense. This other guy, let's just type in Chechen and Mariupol. And let's look at a picture of one of these guys with that helmet on again. Okay, here they are. They're wearing the helmet. Let's wait for it to load the graphics. Come on. Is it that grainy? Apparently it may be that grainy. That's a little sad. We're going to have to move on and find another one. Oh, man. Oh, I wish it would just get higher resolution. There we go. Okay, this guy is wearing a comm set, so it makes sense for him. But since I can't find a good picture to show, like, what I'm talking about, we all saw the video, none of them were wearing comm sets. So what was the point of wearing that helmet? I mean, like, that helmet in usefulness is less... It would probably be less effective, considering they're not even using a comm headset to get the advantage that you could get out of that thing. It's like less useful than a World War I Brody helmet that actually has the brim around it, because that covered about the same area of the head as this one does, but it actually had a brim that extended out on the sides that kind of gave the rest of your head some kind of protection. So, I mean, honestly, if they're not using a comm headset, wearing that helmet is just practically useless. But I thank you very much for the support and sharing that with us. But that's kind of my commentary on it, is that if you're not going to actually use it for what it's intended for, it's pointless. It's kind of like buying a car without wheels to drive it, and then you don't actually put wheels on it to drive it. It's like, what's the point of buying the car if you can't even use it in the way it's supposed to be used? But anyways, I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from DC90 once again. He puts in another $10 donation and says, direct fire from an SPG is almost never done under fire. They are not designed to take rounds larger than 6 or 7.62. I was on an M109A6. We used direct fire at a distance against tanks as a last resort.
Well, thank you very much for sharing the info. And I did have that general assumption going into it, but I was assuming, considering that the SPG did back up after it fired into cover, that it was trying to make it look like in the film, at least, that they were under fire. I may be wrong about that, though. You know, that may just be standard practice, of course, because why in the world would you run the chance of not backing into cover and then being hit by something? So yeah, I see what you're saying. I thank you very much for the info, though, and I'm glad to know that you did serve in some aspect, probably in the U.S. military. Not really sure if it was the Army or Marines, but thank you very much for your service and the support as well. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a comment from B. Ledbetter, who puts in a donation of $10 and says, "Thank you for all your hard work and Slava Ukraine."
And I thank you very much, and Slava Ukraina. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, let me get rid of a bot real quick. There we go. The next one up is from Will Riley, who says, "Chuck Norris wears Dick Cheney underwear."
Okay. I thank you very much for the support. I don't know what that means, actually. But it's good to know that Chuck Norris is wearing Dick Cheney's underwear. So thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next one is from Speed Break once again, putting in an $8 donation. He says, "For the doggy."
Well, thank you very much. I do. I don't know if you're talking about the dog in the video or my dogs, but if it is for my dogs, I'm going to make sure that they are well fed with that money. I'm going to give the big one named Sheba. I'm going to give her a lot of little giblets, like wet food and stuff, you know, out of the can. She loves that stuff. She can't get enough of it. And also they have this weird thing now where they like wet, soggy dog food, which is weird. They won't eat like hard food now, which is kind of odd, but you know, that's getting into an aside on the dogs. But I thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, I want to recognize two donations real quick. We have an $8 donation from David Williams and a $6 donation from Ben Tommen. Thank you much for your support of the channel. And then we have a comment from Ben Tommen who says, "Thanks for the stream. Saludos."
Thank you very much for your support, and I believe, let me see. Let me type that in. Saludos in Spanish. Regards. Okay, all right. Thank you very much for your support, and saludos to you too. I did take Spanish in school, but it's been years since I've actually used Spanish, so I'm sorry if I was kind of ignorant as to what that meant. But I thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a comment from Mon Turn, who says, "Congratulations on 40,000 subscribers. Way to go, Leaf Spring Army. Slava Ukraine."
I agree. It's really something. I can't believe I reached 40,000 subscribers. If you had asked me where I would have been in a month from now, well, a month ago, I would have never said that I would have been reporting the news nightly for hundreds of Ukrainians and thousands of people around the world and doing such great things like all the massive fundraisers we've had. I would have never believed that any of this would have been possible. And I got to say, I thank y'all all so much for being subscribers to this channel and regular viewers and all the new viewers who've come through. It means a lot to me that all of y'all do enjoy the content, and I just got to say, I thank y'all so much. I'm definitely going to try after this war to make sure that the content we cover, although it won't be Ukraine stuff anymore because that war will be over, we will try and cover some of the aftermath videos, and then we'll move on to other stuff that's international and domestic within the United States, and try and make the videos so good that y'all can enjoy those as well. So I thank y'all all very much once again. I'm so glad that we've all gotten to this point as a team. And so thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Orlos the Droid, who says, "How much money did we raise for UNICEF? Last I saw was over $8,000.
We actually raised something like $14,300 for UNICEF. Now, that's a pretty good number, but total, over all 4 fundraisers that we've conducted on this channel, which is every Sunday, by the way, so if you're a new viewer and you're just listening to the questions because you like the stream, make sure to come here on Sunday, because we actually run a channel fundraiser for a organization that's operating inside of Ukraine. It's operated by YouTube, so all that money goes straight into an account that's earmarked for that organization. It's not any kind of like scam thing, because a couple of people try to perpetrate that, and I don't like that because that can scare people away, and on top of that, it's safe because it's under the YouTube Give program. But anyways, moving on from that, we do run fundraisers, and we've raised almost $90,000 for these fundraisers. That includes Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF, and the American Red Cross, which are all working in Ukraine tirelessly to provide people with help and care. So I'm very thankful. I'm more than thankful, and that makes me so proud that we've done that in 1 month, just 4 weeks time. We've done that much help, and that makes me incredibly proud to know that I'm running a channel that can do that much good and help in a situation like this. And so I thank you once again for asking, because it allowed me to boast about how well this channel has done helping out Ukraine. And in the future, maybe I could start running streams after this war is over to raise funds for charitable causes operating in areas around the world that I can make news stories on this channel, which would be pretty interesting to me, and also that'd be a great deal of good. Maybe I could make like a news organization in the future that reports the news but also tries to do some deal of good for the people that I'm reporting on. That would be a really interesting concept. But with that, thank you very much, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from Mihavel P, who says, most important international news is Germany nationalizing Gazprom Germania, which controlled almost all Russia gas and oil business in Europe.
That's very interesting. I did not know that. I think I had a viewer reach out to me and mention that before the stream, but I was trying to work on some other things and I didn't have time to include it. And also we had reached like 38 points today, which is like the maximum I ever do. And so I couldn't include that, unfortunately. But I thank you very much for bringing that up. And I kind of did know it, but I really didn't before the stream. So thank you once again, and thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up is a question from That Frost Wolf, who is a longtime channel supporter. They say, how do you think Ukraine will take back the South and East?
If Ukraine was to take back the South, I mean, that's kind of a tough thing to say because that could be providing information to the Russians, but I'm sure they've already heard it before, so hopefully I'm not doing a lot of harm here by saying this. The first thing they're going to do is retake Kherson. That's really going to be reliant on how successful the Southern Front will go, because once they retake Kherson, the Russians have completely lost the ability to push any offensives into western Ukraine, because they'd have to cross the Dnieper River, which only has certain points which can be crossed at these bridges. And if the Russians don't control any of those bridges, they lose the possibility of actually crossing over into the western side of the country and starting offensives through there. So I think that's going to be the first thing they go for, and once they do that and cross over this bridge in Kherson, they will pretty much be met with success, I believe, because if they're able to take Kherson, they'll be able to do really anything in that area, because they'll probably beat the Russians so badly they'll be caught in the middle of a retreat or reorganizing at that point in that area. So in the short term, that's what I see being incredibly important in the Southern Front. But I don't want to talk too much about it, just in case if I start hitting things dead on the nail and there's some kind of Russian person in here taking down notes, like, Sergey or something, and he's like, wow, this is a great stream, thanks for the show, Enforcer, and then he's like using this against Ukraine. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope I answered that question the best I could. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a comment from That Frost Wolf once again, who says, we've seen Zelensky award soldiers with beautiful medals. What do you think he will give to the foreign volunteers who fought alongside them?
I think he will be giving medals. It's usually not unheard of. It's actually kind of common for countries to give foreign fighters fighting for them inside of their country awards and medals. I just don't think we've seen an example of that yet, but I'm sure we will see some example of it soon within the near future. Of course, not all of them will be given medals. Well, maybe they'll come up with a medal like the World War II medal or the Korea medal, where you just get it for going there, or the Vietnam. I think Vietnam was just a ribbon. I don't know. I think it had a medal that came with a ribbon as well. But yeah, I think they might give something like that out to all of them. But actual awards for bravery and valor in combat, of course, will only be issued even to foreigners on the basis that they actually did something that was brave or valorous in the face of war. So I thank you very much for the support. I think it will happen. It's just that it hasn't happened yet. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another question from That Frost Wolf, who says, Big John is picking risky POWs up and carrying them like toddlers. Happy to see the good guys are winning. Haha.
Oh, thank you very much for the support. I know which one you're talking about. You're talking about that giant, lanky, corn-fed guy who was in that hospital clearing it. That guy was huge. I mean, I think he was the guy who actually kicked in that door, and he was so large he just kicked it in with ease. It was like playing in a dollhouse for him. But yeah, thank you so much for the support. And that guy, man, I mean, like, if he ever called a Russian, I think the Russians would just, like, die. I think they'd die of, like, a heart attack or a panic or something, like, you know, some kind of, like a raccoon or something, or a possum, because that guy is so huge. I think people would just be scared to see him coming. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer something about the big guy. I mean, like, I was impressed with the absolute size of that guy. That guy was a unit. So anyways, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question is from BSG Wolf, who says, "Here's a $5 for the nitric acid Coke fund."
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure I'll be able to use that incredibly well, and I do enjoy a nice bit of nitric acid here and there. I bet that's probably going to become another joke, but I'm not going to try and force it. I'll see if it does in the chat. So anyways, I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next one is from Diffuse56, who says, "Gandalf said to Russian army, 'You shall not pass.'"
That he did, and it looks like he actually meant it as well, because it looks like they didn't win in the north, and now we don't know how they're going to perform in the east. Maybe they might be able to actually cobble together a little bit of a better logistical situation now that they'll have so many few basing points. But one can only assume that, because it may actually be hard for them to do that at this point. But I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from Caffeine, who says, "Put me down for Enforcer brand leaf springs."
Hey, thank you so much. I bet that's talking about the merch. And we do have an idea. We have a plan right now to actually have Leaf Spring merch. It's going to be limited edition, and it's not going to be around forever, because, you know, this joke, I kind of feel like it has a shelf life, like all jokes. But the shelf life is kind of about these streams, because once we move on from the streams, I don't think Leaf Springs will be mentioned a lot. And so it will be a limited edition thing, but we are looking into it. So hold your horses there, bud, because we are looking at Leaf Spring merch, most likely. So I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Bob A, who puts in a donation of $10. He says, "Any discussion on the areas Russia is focusing on are also the natural resource-rich areas in Ukraine. This includes significant natural gas reserves along the Black Sea, which impacts Russia's monopoly."
That is an interesting input, but one thing I do know for sure, because I looked into this, is that Ukraine has no oil fields to speak of. They import something like 90 to 95% of the oil they use. So while this may be hitting on Russia's natural gas monopoly in the area, I don't think they're going after it for oil, much like the United States did in Iraq in a way, to make sure that the imports would flow. So I could see that, though. I do know that they have large natural gas like deposits down there. It's just that I don't really think the Russians went into this war for that alone, because their offensives didn't really revolve around the southern area at all at the start. They revolved around Kyiv and Kharkiv, which showed that they were trying to maybe annex the entire country for a short while and then install a puppet government. But I thank you very much for the info, and I will put that into consideration when I talk about the future of Ukraine as a whole now, because that may be their strategy. So I thank you very much, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from TKUA, who says, "Are you going to mention the Timofey Sergetsev article on Russian plans for Ukrainians? Please look into it."
I actually haven't heard about that, and I will try and look into that sometime around. I am kind of a little busy right now with college work. It's kind of like getting near the end where the finals pop up. So I won't have a lot of time here in the future to look into it, but I will try nonetheless. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another comment from Knuckles. He says, "I also seen a tweet saying that the USA has gave 50% of our Javelin supply that we purchased over 10 years. This is my continuation from my last donation."
Thank you very much for the support. And let's look at how many Javelins does the U.S. have. More than 50,000 Javelin missiles and 12,000 CLUs currently in service with the U.S. Armed Forces in 19 allied nations. Interesting. So we have 50,000. I don't really know how many we transported over there. I know that the Ukrainians have said they'll need about 500 a day. And so going off of those numbers, I don't know the actual amount that we've sent over there, but 500 a day out of our 50,000 inventory means that we will have 100 days worth of Javelin supplies to give them. And so it may be true, that number may be accurate. But then again, you know, the number isn't limited. munitions for these kinds of weapons can constantly be produced. Right now, as of this moment, there are still Javelin CLUs as well as munitions being built in Troy, Alabama, which is in the state I live in. So I thank you very much for the support. I'm not really sure how that will weigh in on the U.S. situation. I'm sure that they're not going to just give away these missiles and then not replace them for themselves. But I thank you very much for the support, nonetheless, Knuckles. You're always here helping out this channel and making sure that we can keep going. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next donation we have is from Paul, who puts in a $5 donation. Thank you very much, Paul, for your support. Next up, we have another comment from BSG Wolf, who says, how to take out a blonde, spike her shoulder pads, and ask her a question, LOL.
Okay. I don't really know what that's about in particular, honestly, but I do thank you for the support, and hopefully the chat catches on that joke, because it blew right over me for some reason. I don't know why. But I thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a comment from CA Lags, who says, do you think the Chinese will go after Siberia if Putin loses enough material in this war?
No, because, the Russians make it pretty clear, if anyone tries to enter their country, they just nuke them. So the Chinese would be under the same threat. So I don't really think they'll be going for that, because no one wants to get obliterated by a nuclear hellfire, and no one wants to be the one who has to send that back either. So I don't think they will be looking into that. I think, though, right now, we've seen the Chinese and the Indians take great advantage of Russia's terrible economic situation, and now they are starting to import large amounts of Russian natural gas, oil, and so on. So I think that they've kind of taken control of Siberia in a way, at least economically, but the Chinese don't go and annex countries. That's not what they do. They usually get economically involved very deeply inside of countries. Like we saw with the United States leaving Afghanistan and the Taliban once again regaining control. The Chinese immediately went in and started putting their economic tendrils around the government that the Taliban has. And we also see that a lot in the African countries that are currently developing nations at the moment. We see the Chinese doing that with them as well. So I think that's what is kind of going on, is that the Chinese are starting to do that to the Russians and try and get economically intertwined with them to the point the Russians must listen to what the Chinese want. So that's kind of my stance on that. I don't think they will invade, because that would be very bad for them in a way, because nuclear annihilation is kind of a tough thing to deal with. But I thank you very much for the support. That's kind of my answers to the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
Okay, and our next comment of the night is from Cecilia, who puts in a $100 Australian donation and says, for Sheba and her wet dog food, and for her dad, who's doing a great service. That's an interesting comment.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I will make sure to get Sheba the wettest dog food that there is. She's going to just, she's already kind of a little large. I don't want to call her fat, because she's just kind of chubby and pudgy and stuff, which really makes her cute. But with that kind of money, I think she's going to become fat. So I thank you very much for the support. It means a lot to me, and it'll help me run the channel, and it'll also help me make sure that Sheba gets that nice, good, wet food that she likes. So thank you very much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and next up we have a comment from Anthony K. Smith, who puts in a $8 donation and says, Enforcer, read the UK Express article regarding the 267 surrendered Marines. Some legit points in there.
Let's see, surrendered Marines. Let's see, that should pull up like one of the first things, right? Express, there it is. Where is it? Let's see. We'll read this real quick. So just everyone hang tight real quick. Maybe we can get this in late February. 267 Marines, Mariopol, which depicts the line of soldiers fighting with their hands up. However, U.S. Navy SEALs spotted several key details that suggest the video is not all what it seems. But the uniforms are too clean. Nobody's wounded. Nobody needs a shave, and the T-shirts are all wrong. The accompanying picture broke down the video further. Wears a green beret as well as a black and white striped undershirt. Yeah, that is something that that they didn't have in the video, because you see that there's a certain kind of blue. Well, well, in the Russian Naval Marines and the Russian Navy in general, there's this like blue and white undershirt that they all wear. And so, yeah, we don't actually see that here. He had it likely every one of those Marines will own one, both the uniforms, and proudly wear it in combat. they don't have that on them. With the exception of 2 prisoners in the First World wearing small pieces of tape, not one of other of the prisoners was wearing the blue and yellow recognition tape normally worn by Ukrainian combatants. I noticed that as well. I didn't say anything about that, but it was like maybe the Russians had them strip that off of them so that way they wouldn't be mistaken for combatants. You know, because if you see like a mass of Ukrainian forces with blue or yellow armbands on, and you're just at a distance and you don't know they're like a surrendering group, you may gun them down. So I was thinking they may have taken that off, but that is a good point that they did bring up. Another telltale cursory are the ammunition pouches on the soldiers' clothing. That's something that someone pointed out, you know, with like there's grenades in the vests, and I did see that. It looked like their pockets were pretty full. So yeah, there is some pretty good points in here. I'd suggest that everyone takes a good read of this. It's a very long article, but it does have some pretty good points in the opening part of it. So I thank you very much for actually encouraging me to read that, because we did see some good points that were brought up. So I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And the next question of the night is from James Morris, who says, do you think the key to avoiding attrition in the South would be pummeling Russian logistics, namely trains, given they have Switchblade drones?
I think that would be a very good thing for them to do, but the problem is that they probably don't have readily available access to the timetables of military trains, because usually military trains in scheduling for the railroad are classified as special trains, so they aren't actually marked down on the schedule most times, and they're kind of done ad hoc. That serves 2 purposes. One, it serves the fact that the Army has to move whenever the Army needs to, and so they're not set into the schedule, like on Tuesday at 10 a.m. we will set off the train, the military train, from here to there. That's like the first purpose. They're not stuck to a fixed timetable. They're like, we need these tanks moved here, and we need them now. So they get a train, they mark it as a special train that's not on the timetable, they load it up with the rail cars, and then that train takes off. The other thing it serves is that the enemy country will not have a timetable to look at and be like, ah, yes, the military train filled with T-72s is going to leave this city at this time in this rail yard and then arrive in the next city in this rail yard at this time. And so it kind of makes it a little bit hard for them to figure out when those trains are actually moving. It's a kind of like a dual purpose thing, but mostly it's so that way the Army can react immediately to situations instead of having to be stuck in like the queue to get their units moved. So I think it'd be very hard for them to do that, but maybe if they had some kind of spies or saboteurs in Russia that could take keep a good eye on the rail yards and tell them this train has moved out heading in this direction at this time, then maybe they could start using that to great effect. There's always a way. If there's a will, there's always a way, as the saying goes. And so there is a way to attack those trains. It's just that it'd be kind of a little bit difficult on the surface. And so I thank you very much for the support. I do think that would actually affect Russian logistics a great deal, especially taking out the locomotives, or maybe hitting the rails in front of the locomotives, close enough that the train cannot put on the emergency brakes and stop in time, so that way the train could derail and hopefully damage a large amount of equipment, or at least take a large amount of time to recover the equipment. So I thank you very much for the support. That is an interesting observation. We have had a lot of people come on here and just say, kill the conductors or kill the engineers, which is crazy weird, because it's a decent idea, but the idea of having to go and kill all the conductors or all the engineers would just take so long that the Russians would stop it before it could actually get anywhere meaningful. But I thank you very much for the support. That is a very interesting look into it, and I think it's one of the actually more reasonable suggestions. So I thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quickly, I want to recognize 2 more donations. We have a $4 donation from Peter Stevens and a $1 donation from Chris Ledbetter. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. And with that being said, we're moving on to a question. We have one from Peter Stevens, who puts in another $4 donation. He says, what happens if Japan joins the war? Do you try Jink? This would be a good ally strategy? I'm not sure if you mistyped that.
I don't think the Japanese will join the war, although they've kind of rekindled the claims they have on the Kuril Islands. I don't think they will actually pursue them. The Japanese, at that point, in Russia's eyes, would probably be directly threatening their sovereignty, attacking Russian land, that they've been claiming for around 70 years or so. And so I think that that wouldn't be something the Japanese would do. Also, you have to remember that the Japanese are in the process right now of remilitarizing. They did revoke the article in their constitution that kind of made that a little tough. And so they did revoke that, but they are not at the stage now where I would say that they're actually truly a military power like they were during the Russo-Japanese War, where they did beat the Russians like terribly at sea and on land in a small way. So I thank you very much for the support, but I don't think the Japanese would pursue that right now, considering that one reason alone is that I don't really think their military is at a state where that would be possible for them. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And how many super chats do we have left, Matthew?
So we actually just have one left.
All right, let's get to it then.
All right, and the last one, it goes to Tarian, who says, "Can we have some blue and yellow on the map, please?"
Blue and yellow on the map. I think you're talking about the flag. Unfortunately, I can't get a flag in here, but we do have blue and yellow markers. You know, we've got some blue here, some yellow there. You know, the yellow is day 3 and the blue is day 5. So, I mean, like, you know, they're kind of close, but I might try and put something on the map that's blue and yellow, although it's kind of hard on Google My Maps. So I thank you very much for the support. I will try. And with that, we're going to move on to 3 questions from the live chat, and then we're going to end the stream.
Okay, and the first question we have from our regular chat is from Vitaly. He says, "Enforcer, did you see that Russians are digging trenches in Belgorod? Are they expecting Ukraine to take the war back to Russia?"
I haven't actually seen that. I don't have any footage, so I'm going to have to kind of quote ignorance there about that situation. But if they are, that may be suggesting that they are in a very bad strait, and maybe these forces that are moving in this area aren't actually moving into Ukraine, but they're being set up in defensive positions in Russia. I don't think that that's all the case. That's at all the case, because the Russians, while doing terribly, aren't in the situation where they could get pushed back that badly. And I think at that point they would probably start nuking the Ukrainians because they've actually started to encroach into Russian territory. But who knows? I mean, like, that may be the case. There really is no explanation if they are digging trenches as to why. So I thank you very much for the support, and that's kind of my assessment of the matter, although that was just brought to my attention just right then. So I hope that does answer your question in a way, and so we're going to move on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Echo Sierra, who says, "Enforcer, will the Russians send more conscripts to fight in the East Theater?"
I think like, you know, everyone's been talking about that April 1st draft. 130,000 guys were drafted in that draft. The thing is, though, is that it will take time to train them, and we did go over the training timetable, and at best, they could probably be ready to go to the front in 4 months, and then by then the war is over. Like, regardless, however it went, whether the Ukrainians won or lost, it's going to be over in 4 months' time for sure. And so I don't think that those conscripts will be used in this war, but just speaking about the conscripts that are currently in the service, they may like try and add a few, but logistically they just really can't. They really can't even support the force that they have in there right now, as far as the logistics numbers were weeks ago. And we know that they've had almost 1,000 trucks destroyed, which is about a quarter of their logistical force, which means that they could be in an even far worse situation if the civilian vehicles that they've commandeered aren't able to make up for that kind of loss. So I don't really think that you would be able to logistically add any more forces to the war in Ukraine, because then they'd just be running the risk of having everything absolutely fall apart because they'd be overstraining their logistical supply lines again. So that's kind of my assessment on it. But then again, that's based off of public information. It has held up to be true in the northern front, but that may be different in the southern front. They may have actually built some railheads down there, because we know that an armored train did move through Mariopol a while ago, which suggests that the railheads may be closer to the front line down there than they were in the north. But then again, that's all just kind of like assumptions based off of what I know. So I thank you for the question. I hope I answered it to a pretty good degree. And with that, we're moving on to the last question of the night. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And the final question of the night goes to 907 Pike, Alaska, who says, "Enforcer, did you hear Xi Jinping's speech, which sounded like saber rattling before an invasion of Taiwan?"
I did not hear the speech. We would know, because the United States did know about the Russian military buildup for quite some time. We would know about a Chinese military buildup that was trying to invade Taiwan well before it actually went underway. So if that is going to happen, I'm sure that we would already have public information knowing that. And also, I have to claim ignorance on the speech because I haven't actually heard it myself. I've been focusing entirely on Ukraine. And so international things beyond that have kind of been slipping by me. And it was even like a grace of good fortune that I even heard about what happened in Erbil with the missile strike that occurred there weeks ago. So to answer that, I'm kind of ignorant as to what's going on in that corner of the world. I've been trying to focus specifically on what's going on in Ukraine. So I'm sorry I can't really comment on that speech all too much. But with that, we've actually answered all the questions of this segment tonight and covered the news entirely. If you're a new viewer who's been watching through the question segment, welcome to the streams. And also make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as well as my regular viewers. Make sure to like the video, and also do it as soon as you get on the video, because it helps us out analytically and it helps us to reach more people and more people can hear the news. So if you like the news, make sure to do other people a favor and like the video as soon as possible, because it'll help them reach it sooner rather than later, because you know these streams are live, so it helps out a lot more for them to be early than after the stream or at the end, because then you know people are joining at the very end of it. But I thank you all so much for the support. We've gotten huge amounts of support tonight. I'd like to once again thank probably the largest donation in the channel's history. I think we had one more like this, but I'd like to thank Gordon Bushman again, and also Cecilia, for y'all's donations, because those are huge and those help us to run this channel a great deal. Probably more than just run the channel. It helps us to think of like traveling around the world, interviewing people on the spot nearly. So I thank you very much once again for everyone's support, and I'm glad that we still have a large following and we're able to report the news every single day. So thank you once again, and I hope y'all have a great night. Take care, and I'm going to hand y'all over to that wonderful intro and that wonderful anthem. Have a great night.